like to call to order the August 27th Board of Trustees meeting. Okay, and are there any public comments? I see we have two slips, public comment slips for closed session items. Mhm. Yes.
So we have two public comments. We have John Morris and then Sheridan Rosenberg. Do it in that order? Pardon? I'm going to turn mine in. Okay.
Is this for closed session, ma'am? Yes. Okay. Could we have the first one come out, go ahead and come on up?
Could I have John Morris to come up, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Morris, and I'm a member of Fair Education Santa Barbara, Inc. I'm here tonight to talk about Kerry Matsuoka and request that his contract not be renewed and that he be dismissed. I could give many reasons for this request. However, since I'm limited to 3 minutes, I will give only 3 reasons, any one of which should be sufficient to call for his dismissal. First is the appalling condition of the facilities as documented in the Williams Act complaints filed by Fair Education, and in particular the restrooms at Santa Barbara High. Any restaurant which maintains such restrooms will be shut down by the health department. It's now been reported that the restrooms in the elementary schools are also disgusting. Bond funds for renovation have been available since 2016, yet virtually nothing was done before the Williams Act complaints. This is a pattern of flagrant neglect throughout the district on Mr. Matsuoka's watch. Second is the way the Mad Academy scandal was handled. In January 2018, a student reported Pablo Sweeney's inappropriate conduct to Dan Williams, who was a mandated reporter. Mr. Williams did not report this. A year later, the student went to Tiffany Carson, corroborating his report with explicit photos and texts. Ms. Carson was also a mandated reporter, yet no police report was made. Pablo Sweeney was removed from campus, and Mr. Williams was put on leave, so Mr. Matsuoka, another mandated reporter, had to know what was happening. Third, Mr. Matsuoka compounded the problem by an apparent cover-up attempt. Rather than make a police report, which would be free, the district, through its lawyers, hired a private investigator to interview students and teachers. As a mandated reporter himself, Mr. Matsuoka knows the law and could not reasonably accept legal advice that no police report was required. If a lawyer said it's okay to rob a bank as long as you use a toy gun, would you accept his advice or fire him?
Thank you.
At this point, the board has a binary choice to make.
Thank you, sir. Your 3 minutes is up.
Was that?
It's your 3 minutes up. We have 3 minutes for public comment.
Serious? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so now we'll have Sheridan Rosenberg, and the president, Ms. Sims Moten, is timing the presentations to 3 minutes and giving a 30-second warning at that time.
Hi, I'm Sheridan Rosenberg. I'm here also today to speak about P7, asking the board not to continue Mr. Matsuoka's contract, that it has been under his tenure that we've obviously seen the conditions of the facilities that were brought to the attention of the board by members of Fair Education and students and teachers, as well as the Mad Academy, more members of Fair Education, bringing that to light so that it can get resolved. And I think that this is really an opportunity, if not really a duty, for you as board members who are really the custodians of our children, and as such, I think that it's time for you to terminate the contract, certainly not to extend it. And if I might add, everyone is watching. The entire community is watching and looking to you for leadership. And I can also add that this is a board that is comprised entirely of women, of mothers. And, we really do take notice of this. So please have some courage, do the right thing, and let's not extend this contract. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next public comment, Peggy Wilson. Our final comment.
Hello, board members. Thank you for having me. I also look at you as gatekeepers of our children and youth, their well-being. And so I am also calling for Mr. Masuda's contract not to be extended. And one of the reasons I am that, there's a couple, but one, I think, I don't know if you have all read this. I think you have this relationship wisdom. Have you guys read this? The manual for teaching in the health ed classes? Okay, no answer. But it's very disturbing, for one. So this happened on his watch, and all of your watches, actually. And I think one thing that's really interesting in this whole thing, it just talks about, every end of sexuality, pleasure. STDs and this and that, the only way is awareness. Abstinence isn't even mentioned. Very strange. Planned Parenthood has been coming in, which is a nonprofit, to teach the sex ed class, I know for sure, this summer. I think there's a huge conflict of interest when Planned Parenthood comes in and teaches this, and when our children, our young people, are overly sexualized, where are they going to go to an abortion? Planned Parenthood has a vested interest in this. This is absolutely absurd that that would even happen. They are promoting sexualizing our kids, and then on the same token, they're making money off of them. So this is under your watch. I do ask for your resignation and your contract not to be renewed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes public comment.
Okay, thank you. We will now adjourn to closed session to discuss items B1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All us back to regular sessions. Dr. Matsuoka.
Buenas tardes, tenemos interpretación al español por si alguien gusta escuchar la reunión en español. Good evening. In order to provide language access, we have Spanish interpretation available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Also, headsets for the hearing impaired are available. Please indicate if you should need a headset. So announcements from closed session. Item B1, the board voted unanimously in closed session to approve interdistrict transfer appeal number 2019-2020T9. The motion was made by Ms. Capps and seconded by Ms. Ford. The board voted unanimously in closed session to approve with stipulations discussed in case number 2019-2020T10 interdistrict transfer appeal. Motion by Ms. Capps and seconded by Ms. Ford. The board voted unanimously in closed session to deny interdistrict transfer appeal number 2019-2020T11. The motion was made by Ms. Sims, seconded by Ms. Munoz. The board also voted, item B3, the board voted unanimously in closed session to approve recommendation of a proposed 2-day unpaid suspension of a classified employee. That concludes the announcement of closed session actions. Now we'll have the superintendent report.
So it's my privilege to introduce a new assistant principal at Santa Barbara High School. His name's Daniel DuPont. And Daniel comes to us from, okay, help me out, Daniel. Placentia Yorba Linda. It's a large district in Orange County, about 30,000 students. Daniel is a 19-year veteran in education, and he comes to us with experience in the assistant principal role of about 5 years. He's done master schedule and guidance, so he was a midsummer find, and we are really pleased to have Daniel join us. So I've invited him to come up and introduce himself to the board. So Daniel, we have a podium over here. And as he makes his way, so let's all welcome Daniel.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, members of the board. I appreciate the chance to introduce myself. Dan DuPont, Assistant Principal at Santa Barbara High School, officially on week 3 of sort of building the aircraft mid-flight, and I've been having a blast doing it. Like Mr. Matsuoka said, starting my 20th year, 14 of those was a Spanish teacher at the high school level. I got to open up Yorba Linda High School as one of the founding staff members. That was an amazing once-in-a-career opportunity. I never planned to leave Placentia Yorba Linda. And then in early July, my wife sent me the EdJoin posting, and we're both Gauchos. And we'd always said, we're going to live in either Santa Barbara or Spain. And we have a 4-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old daughter. And we looked at each other and said, if we don't do it now, we're not going to do it for another 17 years. So I've been incredibly supported and welcomed since I've been here. I want to thank Dr. Elise Simmons, the principal. She's welcomed me with open arms, put up with my thousands of questions as I jump and hit the ground running. I want to thank Dr. Becchio for his help in getting me here. Coming on staff a week before school started was not easy, and he helped make it as seamless as it could have been, so thank you very much. I'm looking forward to being back in the city I fell in love with during my undergrad career, and I'm really excited for this cycle of inquiry that has begun. I have 13 years of working with PLCs, and in my former district, it was Solution Tree and RIC DeFore. And I'm excited this new iteration that is the cycle of inquiry and the focus on the PLC process that's going on. It has been fun and overwhelming and amazing, and I've been loving every single minute of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So my other comment is we opened school last week. It's probably for our staff, it probably feels like weeks ago, but it's only been 6 days of school. My observation, I hit 13 campuses that day. By noon, it felt like we had been in school for weeks. And I would attribute that to our site leaders, our district leaders. I mean, I think we're seeing the fruits of experience and systems. And so it was a great opening school. Here's an observation that I'll make, and it has to do with the context of Santa Barbara. So I really believe that how we are networked with others, both within a community as such as Santa Barbara, but also the larger ecosystem of education. And so I met one of our new teachers who's going to be working in the MAD Academy at Santa Barbara High School, and he's from Palo Alto High School, which is where I used to work up in Silicon Valley. And so I look forward to chatting with him about, so what were you doing up in Palo Alto Unified, which is a very high-performing place, and what ideas can you bring to Santa Barbara and to an exceptional program, and let's make it better. And we benefit when we are connected with efforts that are outside of our district and really outside of this Santa Barbara context. I want to connect that with the multilingual pathway community meeting that we held at Washington yesterday. And you know what's so important about that is, now it does take some explaining, multilingual pathway, meaning that we want our students to grow up being multilingual. There is an initiative, it's called the California 2030, is it Vision? Global California 2030, where it is the vision that for our students in California, that they all grow up multilingual. And the reason for it is we are a global world. We're a global community, so interconnected. The benefits for language, culture, and also economics for your career, if you can communicate in another language, you are going to be more valuable to a company and to an experience. I look at my children and especially my daughters-in-laws, they're bilingual in different languages, Mandarin, Farsi, I mean, just all kinds of very interesting cultures and languages. And the advantages to our students as they enter the world being multilingual is really important. So that speaks to being connected to a larger community. So I share those as opening comments of this school year. It's going to be a great year, and we look forward to sharing the work as we go along. Thank you.
Board comments and correspondence. Ms. Ford.
Thank you. Well, yes, school has started, and I think we've been in school for a week, and I've noticed that back to school nights are getting earlier and earlier. I think there already have been 3, and I was happy to attend 2. Cleveland and Roosevelt, and I just think there's such a great opportunity for the curriculum to be shared, for the teachers and staff to show off their sparkly and clean campuses, and so I'm looking forward to attending quite a few more. I also just want to mention that I was so honored to attend the presentation of Pedro Noguera, and I thought that he made some challenges to all of us that were very powerful, in particular asking the question of all of us, what is your impact and are you making a difference? And then to follow the evidence. And so I hope that that will highlight all of our work in the coming months. And also, I'm just really proud to endorse and support my friend and board colleague, Laura Capps, in her next step and her endeavors to follow her dreams and passions.
Ms. Capps?
Well, with that, I better speak. Thank you. I also, too, went to 3 back-to-school nights this past week, and it's wonderful. It's a time of hope and excitement, and two as a board member and 1 as a parent. But I look forward to more as well. I just think they're such a good time of the year. And yes, I have announced today, it just came from an announcement, in fact, that I am running for county supervisor. And I wanted to say that here because, in part, because there has been some confusion that I might be leaving the board. I don't expect people to sort of track terms, but no, in fact, this board is very important to me and this work is extremely important to me. And so I would, if successful, this would be following my term here on the school board in 2021. So I'd be completing my term. So just wanted to make that clarification and acknowledge the big move that I've made. Thanks.
Additional comments? Others? Dr. Reed?
Just wanted to say that I was out of town last week, so I wasn't able to attend some of the back-to-school events, but I have them on my list to do. And having been a past classroom teacher, I know how exciting it is and how important these days are in the beginning, but also to show my interest as a board member and know that I really appreciate all that the teachers are doing in their classrooms to prepare for the year, but also the work on a daily basis for what they do. So I just want to acknowledge all of their great work and the potentiality of the future of our school year for all of our students. So thank you.
Ms. Munoz?
Okay, I'm excited about the new school year, and I know that there's been so much work put in for that. Dr. Noguera, his speech was very inspiring to me, and, echoed a lot of the, okay, let's do this. Let's be an active school district and do our best for all of our students and be inclusive. I also attended a workshop organized by Rachel Stadell with YouthWell about substance abuse and our students. That was very well attended. It was a Sunday afternoon. There was youth there, there were school staff, there were many parents and community members, many good questions at that. I also attended this last Sunday, the Pride Festival in our community, and it was a joy just to see everyone out there. Many of the different agencies in Santa Barbara had booths there, and it was it was a wonderful event. And one of the singers included the children. They were in front dancing and wanting to partake, and they were included in that. And just, and I talked to her afterwards about how I'm on the school board and how important the children are to us in our community. And she was interested to hear more about that. The Multilingual Pathways workshop led by Francisca Sanchez was excellent, and I'm just very excited about all that we're going to be doing in the coming year. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I will just conclude that I too actually I visited 6 first day schools, and I had some great tours and some wide-eyed, almost sleepy students, but they were eager and ready to be there in those terms, and so they actually said hello, and they were sharing some things. So I was really taken by that excitement that they're showing, and appreciate who they are. They're showing up, even though it's the first day of school. And so I had the opportunity to talk to them. And so from the elementaries, also junior high, as well as 3 of the high schools. So get to see the changes that are going on, the facility changes that are going on at the schools, to actually get to see them up front. And also thank you, whoever put together with regards to Dr. Noguera, how exciting that was and how inspiring that was. And anybody that knows me, I was just like on the edge of my seat, almost shouted hallelujah, but I didn't want people to think they're in church. But I'm just saying it was just that inspiring enough to the point that it was an inspiring call to action for all of us to be able to do. And one of the things, he said many things that we certainly could take away from that, but one of the things he said in the earlier session was that our role with our students to support our students' success is beyond our titles. You're the janitor, you're the cafeteria person, you're whoever. If you're in this district, you have a role to support these students, and your role is important to do that, because we see our students in so many different ways. They're not just necessarily seen in the classroom. You're seen as a janitor. And oftentimes there are students who will form a relationship with someone who's not necessarily seen. So they're forming trusted relationships. So we all have a role in the success of our students and the social and emotional well-being, of our students. And so I appreciated that. And that's important too, that we continue to know that each and every one of us have a role in the success of our students, of every last one of our students. And so I appreciated that with regards to that. And it just felt in both sessions how energetic it was. Folks were really getting on to that, just to that energy itself. And you can see it as I visited the schools that let's start to get some action here. Let's start to do something. Yes, it's been challenging, but we can overcome those challenges in terms of that, if we're being open and honest about what things that our students need, and we're open to hear different sides and different ways to do that. So I was really inspired by that day and appreciated that being put together. Also, did Daniel leave for the principal? He's still here. Oh, so you also said you have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. Well, I have a new parent kit for you, because I was my first 5. So anytime I hear under 5, I'm going to make sure we get the best resources that we have. So I'll be touching base with you. All right. So next we'll move to public comments.
Okay. We have 2 general public comments. The first is, I'll call to the podium James Fenkter for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone had a great summer. Before I begin, I also wanted to congratulate Laura Capps for stepping up to democracy's challenge. It's good that we have competition of ideas. I wanted to speak earlier in the closed session. Unfortunately, I think the time moves around a little bit, and I would just like to ask if there is a set time for that. I know other people did as well. And my question there was really in regards to the review of the superintendent. I think it's been on the agenda many times. My question is really, what are the key performance indicators for this role? At Fair Education, we believe that all students should be given the knowledge, the critical thinking skills, and the character to succeed. And I think this should be a student-centric type of focus. That's why we're here. And I'd be interested to know what are those indicators, because I would hate for anything to be subjective in this, a very important basis. And secondly, I came across a document. As you know, I'm part of a lawsuit with Fair Education. And I know that within the school district, there's been those that have advocated strenuously for this funding of Just Communities Central Coast and the provision of their indoctrination. And what I found here is the Articles of Incorporation for Just Communities has as the secretary Fran Wageneck, who is on the podium here. And, of course, I respect everyone's opinion, and she deserves, of course, the right to her opinion. My concern, of course, is using one's position of authority or influence in making these decisions. So I don't know as a board if you were aware of that fact, but I wanted to share that with you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll call up, let's see. excuse me, Sheridan Rosenberg.
Good evening, and Laura, I forgot to congratulate you. I'm really happy you're running, actually. Thrilled, actually. This is about the ethnic studies curriculum. I have been interested in being on the curriculum committee since June of last year, and I did put in a call and got a return phone call from Carrie Martin saying that my meeting would not be taken and I would not receive a return phone call from Sean Carey regarding that committee. And so I just wanted to make it public that I really genuinely would like to be on that committee, as would my colleague and my dear friend James Finkner. And just a suggestion, rather than have these committees for development of curriculum behind closed doors in an administrator's office, I think it's appropriate to have it in an open forum, perhaps even in this room, where people are welcome to come in and observe, and it's fully transparent, and they could give input, because I think this is a very important first step, given that it's a mandate. So I would really like to just let you know that I do want to be on that committee. James would like to be on that committee, as would others in our organization. And we suggest that we hold those meetings publicly. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to ask one question of I have one remaining speaker card, but I believe it's in reference to the item later on our agenda. It's up on, Peggy Wilson wants to speak, or a bunch of you actually want to speak on sex education, but I believe is you're in reference to the agenda item that's coming up?
Well, not really.
The health report?
We don't need to be underneath an agenda item. We can just.
Well, if it's relevant to that agenda item, that you do.
Okay.
So with your permission, we'll address your concern or your comments then. Thanks. That wraps up public comment.
Okay. Next, we'll move to consent agenda. Board members, are there any items that you'd like to pull? I just had a question actually on, I believe it's on D2, just if, I'm not sure if that, Dr. Ramirez, can you come up? I just had a quick question. Could you just for further knowledge, what exactly the Astro Camp is and what's the impact to our students? And
Sure. The Astro Camp is, as it indicates there, it's in Idlewild. It's an overnight camp. I want to say that this is for, doesn't delineate there, but I want to say that this is for sixth grade students, paid for by, in conjunction with the Audacious Foundation, and typically fundraise jointly with the PTA. The Astro Camp specifically is another, it's largely experiential based and focuses on, you know what, it would probably be better that I give you some additional information and follow up, but it is an overnight residential camp.
Okay.
Because I don't want to misinterpret the focus of that experience.
so this is a statewide camp that many schools participate in. It's not something we specifically go to as a district. It's all
Several of
students
our
from around.
schools have
Okay.
participated in the
Okay.
past and are
Yeah.
probably looking to participate in the current year. As we are receiving those requests, we are bringing them forward. So that'll be something that in our principal meeting next week, we'll continue to evolve as we talk about field trips and approval paths.
Yeah, and I probably didn't want to put you on the spot. I had it on my notes to call you when I first came up.
No,
the agenda,
it's fine,
but-
and if it's appropriate, we can bring that forward with more information about the scope and focus specifically of the programming.
Yeah, I'm fine with it, but thank you that. But I would love the additional information, but I'm fine with approving it, so, okay, thank you. Ms. Ford?
Thanks. As long as Dr. Ramirez is up there, I just wanted to ask you about your planned travel on October 3rd. I was wondering, what is it about Sycamore Junior High School that makes it, in Reno, Nevada, that makes it exciting for you to head there?
This is actually this is the dual immersion program, and this
Right.
is actually the two-way immersion conference that is happening in Reno. I'm actually not attending. As you know, we're launching the dual language pathways up through grade 8, and this is a regional conference that was recommended. There will be a team of us that will be attending, including staff from Santa Barbara Junior High School, as well as our director of English learner and parent engagement programs, Maria Larios Horton. So it is really to, as we had mentioned in the prior sessions, an attempt to gather more information about how to make sure we have a successful launch.
Okay, that sounds great. That's not exactly what it said there.
Sure, we'll work on making sure that that is made very clear.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Well, would you like for us to bring it back?
No, I know a lot about the conference. I think it'll be great for you to go.
Sure, thank you, appreciate it.
Hearing no additional requests to move, do I have a motion to approve the general consent items?
So moved.
Second.
By Ms. Capps. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We move next to our action agenda, which is E1.
Yes. In the first action item, I move to approve the petition for re-entry from expulsion, case number 201718-18, for readmittance after a full expulsion for 2 semesters.
Okay, do I hear a second? Ms. Ford? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, we love to see readmission. That
We
lets
do.
us know that students have done their work to get back into the regular piece.
Exactly. We have one more. I'd like to move to approve the petition for re-entry from expulsion after 2 semesters, which ended on June of 2018, in the case of 201718-36.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Ms. Ford, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we're looking for E3, approval of tentative agreement between California Employees Association, its Chapter 37, and SB Unified regarding the reorganization of the ASES AOK program. Dr. Becchio.
All right, it looks like I captured my time on the agenda tonight, so I'll start with this item. This is an item that we negotiated with CSEA. I gave you some background information, but let me describe it for you, just in case you need some clarity. We're operating with a program supervisor, 2 program supervisors. One was the supervisor for, I think, 6 or 7 sites, I believe 7. And then the other was a supervisor at La Cumbra for that one site. And so the proposal before you is that we negotiated with the union to actually have that La Cumbra site become like our other sites in that their supervisor position is reduced to a coordinator position. And that the supervisor of the program actually picks up the duties of that site as well. So that's kind of what our restructuring here is in the negotiations with CSEA. They were in approval of it. What we need is board approval to ratify the language in this tentative agreement. The employee at La Cumbra Junior High, while he is being reduced, he will be Y-rated, so his pay rate will be the same. If we replace that position, it will be reduced to a range 30, I think it was 39. And then the increase to the current supervisor, which will pick up also the duties at La Cumbra, the increase is basically because that person is taking on the La Cumbra site now.
Board, do you have any questions, Board? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Becchio. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, you're up again. Approval of tentative agreement with California School Employees Association and Santa Barbara Chapter 37 regarding the effects of 2019 classified layoffs and reductions. Dr. Becchio.
All right. Well, we went to the table with CSEA for a long, arduous meeting to actually put into effect the layoffs that were approved by the board back in April. I provided you with the background information of each of those employees and what the resolution was that we negotiated with CSEA on each of those employees, so you have that. This simply needs your approval.
Any questions, board? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Second reading, discussion of board policy 4119.26, non-fraternization. Dr. Vecchio.
Okay, I brought this before you for the first reading and with some direction from the board, and so I wanted to walk you through those items. We did get a chance to meet with both our bargaining units, and I'll share with you the input that they gave to us. They were in support mostly of this policy. However, if you look at the policy, by the way, it is still on there as non-fraternization policy, but I did put a couple of ideas about naming that I would like you to weigh in on. If you go down to the second paragraph, it was important to our bargaining units that the word inappropriate be placed in that language where it says displays of affection. They were just concerned about, rightfully so, about displays of affection, and sometimes those are appropriate displays of affection. So, and then they also were interested in adding the physical contact, inappropriate physical contact, or displays of affection. Then if you go down a little bit further, some input from our bargaining units. I think that this also, they were in agreement with permitting and being in the presence of alcohol and drug use by students. So I think that was language that the board brought forward. They were fine with that. However, when we got to the transporting of students, both bargaining units were interested in seeing the transporting of students without parent and administrative written approval taken out of this policy. They believe that it belongs in a different policy somewhere, but that not in this one. So that was their recommendation, that that be taken out. If you turn the page, one last item, our bargaining units both would like to see and collective bargaining agreements added to that language under investigation, so that we follow board policy and our collective bargaining agreements. And with that, I will turn it over to you for your input.
Ms. Capps?
Well, thank you for your work on this and for theirs as well. Their suggestions make sense to me. I just want to clarify on the physical contact that it couldn't be interpreted as that you can't have any physical contact. So I'm just, that inappropriate applies to both. Just to wordsmith for a second. I don't have to wordsmith, but if I just want to make sure that inappropriate applies to both, which is the spirit of their concern.
We could add the word inappropriate once again
Just to
before.
make sure, just so a pat on the
physical
back
contact.
isn't somehow viewed as outlawed.
Okay.
Thanks. And then I don't quite understand, if Brian, if you could pull it up, where the reference is to transportation, if we could review that, please.
It's in the second. So if you see down there in the red mark that's stricken out, it says, and engaging in sexual contact and or sexual relations and transporting of students without parental and administrative written approval.
And was there a suggestion of which policy that this would fall under?
Well, we have policy around transportation of students, field trips and things like that. And they believe that if we wanted to call out for employees not to do this, it should be in a board policy on transporting students.
Can you share a rationale for taking it out of this policy and making sure that it's in the other?
Yeah, I think the rationale was that there are situations where there could be a student that's transported, and it could be based on safety. For example, if a student was left late at night at campus and there's no way to get a hold of a parent, the employee actually has to make a decision about like maybe just taking that person home. And so they want some discussion, and they want to look at that maybe as a separate policy. Do we want to put that in a separate policy and prohibit staff members from transporting students completely? If they're transporting students without the parent permission and do something inappropriate while they're doing that transportation, this policy would cover that already. So we would already be able to take action because they have inappropriately acted towards that student on the ride home, let's say. So that was the rationale.
Thanks so much. Those three additions, or two additions and one deletion, makes sense to me. Thank you.
Ms. Ford?
Thank you. Dr. Becchio, if you could go to the second page and that last statement that was added about the bargaining units, I was just wondering, would there be a consideration? I don't know what, the sentence just sounds so vague. So is it really so vague, or could you actually describe the applicable board policy and whatever part of the agreement is
Yeah, for example,
cogent?
if we're going to investigate an employee for wrongdoing, they need to be notified within 10 days per our contract. So that would be something that the bargaining units want to see, that the board policy contains that reference that we do have to follow board policy and collective bargaining agreements. For example, there's also language in our CSEA agreement, our SBTA agreement about anonymous complaints. And so they would want to see that section is also followed when we instigate an investigation against an employee. So there's a couple examples.
But there could be more? I'm just wondering, if there really are only two, then why not call them out?
Well, whatever the bargaining, the contract calls for in terms of
Any part of it.
due process. Any times we launch an investigation, or if there's a complaint filed against an employee, so there could be several. I don't know off the top of my head. Them, I actually have the contracts here, so I could look. But and they could be different within the two agreements, two contracts. So I think it's safe to call out that we follow our collective bargaining agreements and board policies.
Thank you.
Mr. Matsuoka?
Yeah, just from a design of policy, I try to avoid like copy and pasting in pieces from whether it's another policy or in this case a collective bargaining agreement, because if that language were to modify, then we have to remember to modify it in all the places that we've copied and pasted. What I much prefer, this is pointing to another binding agreement that we have with our unions. Let's let that contract hold that, and that way this always stays, in a sense, correct, because we're pointing to another document.
Okay. Any other comments, members? Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I would just like some comments from you on the title. So I can just speak to the inappropriate employment behavior that's referenced later in the section, as it encompasses all those things that it describes. And then I put inappropriate socialization with students, which may be easier to understand than fraternization.
Ms. Ford?
I like the one about inappropriate employee behavior.
Is it employee or employment?
I'm sorry, employment.
Okay.
Well, I'll disagree. I like the second one because it's more specific to students, because inappropriate employment behavior could be with other employees, and this one I just feel is more direct. The second.
Ms. Munoz?
I like inappropriate employment behavior and socialization with students.
I would agree with Ms. Munoz. I think anything's better than non-fraternization. I can't even say it, policy. That's back in the olden days, so I think we could put them both together.
What about, would you like me to scratch non-fraternization policy and leave the other two statements?
Yeah. So to what Ms. Munoz just said, combining together, right? And then that would be, and then adding policy to that, because that's the policy of inappropriate employment behavior and socialization, inappropriate association with students. Policy. Thank goodness for this heat. We can get to decisions quickly, can't we? All right. So,
What I'd like to do is, I have your input. I'd like to make the recommended changes. I'd like to pass it by our bargaining units once again. You accepted all of their recommendations. And then I'd like to bring it back to you. Would you like me to bring it back on consent?
That'd be great.
Yes.
so it's on action tonight, but you're saying really you want to pass it by and then bring it back on consent?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, great. So we don't need to take a motion on that?
No.
Just giving direction, okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. E6, approval of certificate revised job description, coordinator, early childhood education. Dr. Becchio.
Okay, so with the departure of Michelle Robertson, we have come to you with two updated job descriptions that will help us actually fill that void. So I'll describe to you, as I did in the background information, I'll describe to you that we are proposing that current employee Daisy Ochoa, she will take on some of the responsibilities. That's the one you have before you. She will take on some of those responsibilities that Michelle Robertson had in her role. We do not intend to fill Michelle Robertson's role, but actually have her duties dispersed across Daisy Ochoa, and then the next job description you'll see is Kathy Serrano. And so what you see here before you is she will go from coordinator of after school and expanded learning to coordinator of early childhood education, and she'll do all the after school components and the early ed components. I'll explain what pieces are going to go to Kathy Serrano in our next item. So you'll see the fiscal impact was $17,968. It is more than the next item you'll hear. The reason for that is Daisy's sitting at a range 14 right now, and this proposal is to increase that to a range 19, and because of the extra duties that she'll be doing. I'll explain to you the lesser increase in our next item on the agenda. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Any question, Ms. Ford?
Just one of clarification, is range 14, 225 days also?
I believe range 14 is 225 days. I mean, I don't have it in front of me. Do you know? Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Dr. Reed?
Yeah, so the reasoning for splitting it up is, can you just explain that a little further?
Yeah, I can take a shot at it, and then Dr. Ramirez might be able to help. We're proposing that that these responsibilities be split up, but we also will have some budget space to hire extra teaching staff for this program. And so, Dr. Ramirez, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Good evening once again, Board. As Dr. Becchio had indicated, we're very, very happy for Michelle in her new role. Nevertheless, it's a big void. It's a big void for us, particularly with the timeline that we were encountering. So in the process of actually flying the position, because we did move forward just to explore that avenue, we started to look inward, and we started to look at the convergence of the after-school space with the early childhood space. And there is already an existing program that really has a hand in both, and that's the program that Ms. Daisy Ochoa Estrada currently holds. She already has been working in that preschool, in the early childhood segment of our student population, and also on the reporting side with the CCTR and CSPP. So there were components of the state preschool contract that were already very familiar to her, and given her background, it seemed like a very good choice from within. So the backfill on her role will not happen. Rather, we will split those responsibilities between the two coordinators. And one will take on more of the reporting and particularly the reporting to the state and the management of the budget, while the other will look at the day-to-day operations and then jointly look at professional learning. So we just really took many passes now at that entire space, and we feel confident that we can make this happen with this level of supervision and a reorienting of some resources to fill some other key roles.
Which was also additional teachers? Is that?
That's something that we're exploring. We're still in the process of determining what that might entail. We have some preliminary ideas, but we're working that through with our human resources, and it really focuses on how to put forward roles that can support professional learning for a very rapidly evolving space. A lot of things are changing in our early childhood space that we need to make sure that our teachers increasingly feel equipped to support, and not the least of which is just sound pedagogical approaches, continuing to develop sound pedagogical approaches for that age group.
I do think we have that on the agenda, right, to have a discussion about the early childhood program?
Yes.
So maybe, yeah, with First Five?
I
We're gonna
ran
join.
into our former director of preschools, and Michelle is planning on presenting a report, especially around the, what's the data?
KSEP?
KSEP.
KSEP data.
Because that's been a longitudinal study. She just has to get permission from her CARP school board to be here, because it's the same day, same time. So we're working on it.
Great. I just appreciate that, because we had talked about that, so it'd be great to have even a broader understanding of how this is all fitting into place.
Absolutely, and we could certainly bring additional information about more concretely of what those changes entail, because I do believe that it will lead to better support for teachers and better support for these roles.
Thank you.
I just have a comment. I just appreciate the attention and the intentionality behind the early care field in terms of that, and it is changing rapidly, particularly with the governor who's favorable for that. And so I'm certainly in support of that, and really wanting to work in stronger conjunction with First Five and the district with regards to this area. So
A new member of First Five told me that she would be helping us, particularly in the articulation space.
Yes. Openly ready to go with it. So fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, are you looking for approval of?
Yes.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
So moved?
Second? Do I have a second?
I second.
Ms. Munoz? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Number 6. Is 6 and 7, or you want to
Well,
explain more on 7?
yeah,
or-
7's related to that, and I think Dr. Ramirez covered that. You'll see the increase is less, and as I explained, she's at I want to say she's 17, and so her movement is just to range 19, so that's why it's the lower cost. And remember, the cost associated with this, or the fiscal impact, is just the direct increase of their salary, so it doesn't take into effect the savings from not backfilling the Michelle Robertson position.
Any comments? Okay, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and I think I'm done.
You t- Now we move into action E8, recommendation to revise the Santa Barbara Unified School District approved pesticide list. Mr. Vizzolini.
Good evening, Board. Superintendent Matsuoka. At our last meeting, as you'll recall, we struck the herbicide Roundup Quick Crow from our pesticide list. As directed by the Board, I reached out to the gentleman who stood up here and made some recommendations. We talked on the phone for a bit, and these 4 are the ones that we've identified as being able to be removed. There are a couple of them. Adonis is the second one on the list here, and it does the same thing essentially as Timbor does, but it's much more environmentally, it's less friendly to our environment, so we're going to strike that and keep Timbor, which is a much more friendly chemical. Drione and PT 515 are both used for control of bees and wasps. We all know what's happening with the bee population, so we have no interest in exterminating bees. Wasps are not a huge problem for us. We treat them with much more friendly things like dish soap, so we're not putting any pesticides in the ground for those either. Of note, we have had a historical problem with beehives at La Cumbre, and we've worked with Santa Barbara Bee Rescue, and we've actually placed a beehive up on the roof of the second story up inside the parapet where it's well away from students. And the theory is that a home hive will keep away hives trying to look for a place, and it's actually worked pretty well. So it's saving us a lot of money with tearing apart our building and pulling out hives that are 50 feet long and 50 years old. And so it's a win-win for us. So we're happy to recommend getting rid of that product. Surflawn we don't use anymore. It's something you spray on the ground before you put down a building, and it's a pre-emergent for weeds. So it keeps them from growing later. Since we aren't putting any portables anywhere, we don't have any reason to use this, so we're comfortable striking that also. So I would just like to open it for comment, and we're asking you to approve the second list. Shows that these are gone in both English and Spanish. And this is the one that gets published for parents in their registration packet.
Okay, Ms. Ford?
I just wanted to say thank you for following up, especially with the expert Adam Vega, and really being so responsive and quick, and I'm very happy with these changes. Thank you.
Ms. Capps?
Yes, I echo that. Thanks so much, Mr. Vizzolini. I did hear from two parents with questions. One wanted to know where she could find our integrated pest management plan.
That goes back to our ADA accessible documents. We have one.
Okay.
If you want to have somebody email me, I'll be happy to send them a copy.
Great.
But it's part of the website issue that EATS is dealing with, and there's a lot of documents that are in that same circumstance,
So
but that's why it's not there.
So we do have one, though.
Absolutely.
I was not aware.
And
of
actually,
her.
we'll be updating it tomorrow.
Great.
Based on
With
your
this.
approval
Okay.
of this list. And so we'll have a revision tomorrow that we can publish too.
Great, music to my ears. Second one is, have we addressed chemicals used in schools, in classes, cleaning, et cetera? Does this?
There are definitely rules about that. The Department of Pesticide Regulation has, a pesticide and an herbicide or anything that kills germs that says, is a problem. So we do work with custodial staff and try and minimize. We've been trying to get the word out about what they can and cannot do. We've eliminated them we're trying to eliminate things like, bug spray and things like that. So in our walkthrough this summer, we noted things like that too. So if we found them in classrooms, we'll be communicating with site administrators and letting them know that it's inappropriate and it's actually against the law.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
No additional comments? Hear motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pizzolini. So,
you.
Board, we typically take a break between our report and action, or you want to continue on, or you want to take a break? You don't need a break? You guys are good? We're continuing on.
We do.
Okay. And for F1. Are we going to do? Okay. We're going to do some agenda amendment. We're going to move to item number 4, and then we're going to come back to F1.
Yes, so we have one speaker card with, looks like 4 people. Just wanted to check. That means that you all 4 share the 3 minutes. Great. So I would like to call up, please, Barbara Bastini, Mary Hudson, Peggy Wilson, and I can't read Sharon's last name, but thank you for waiting and thank you for being here. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Hi.
So one of the 4's missing. She had to leave.
Okay.
Hello, Santa Barbara School Board and Supervisor. There are 5 of us here that are interested in being a part of the committee to overlook the Comprehensive Sexuality Education Curriculum, which is CSE, which is AB 329, mandated to be taught in junior high and high school. The framework is very broad, and can be selected and wide and can be selected by school districts. The elementary school district can choose to adopt it or not, which would be the Santa Barbara School District, at the appropriate levels. The word appropriate is subjective, however, and we feel that there needs to be a community input to what is taught in our public schools. And we all have been here for many years. So we here have different backgrounds, including educators, coaches, elementary school teacher, high school teacher, businessman, and he's not here, but he might want to join us. And also a charter school founder who is a Berkeley graduate and mother of Kitty Perry, which is Mary right here. So it's a nice broad group of people who would like to work together and work with you to make the curriculum more palatable for our district and our children. So we're asking also that you would please consider making it transparent, public, and held here in this building. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes comment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to F4.
Yes, so, well.
No, that's what we were asking, to switch it out of order, so F4 to be taken, but she's already spoken on F3. We'll come back and discuss it. That's what I was, I initially said F4, to move F4 up before the rest of the thing. So.
I misunderstood.
Yeah,
it's okay.
it's okay.
You're fine.
I'm
So
sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah,
that public
it's okay.
comment will, remember in your mind to connect it with
Yes,
item
F3.
3.
Yes.
But I'd like to now move item 4 first, because we have members of the Dos Pueblos High community here as part of that report.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, slide deck clicker. Just a note to the board and to the community. I'd written a slide deck, and it didn't get included in the board agenda. To assure the public there's nothing new or secret in it. Slide decks are always a summary of the narratives and the content. So this will just help the board and the audience to be sort of follow the train of thought. But Sandra has probably already uploaded that to the board agenda. Okay? All right, and Brian's now loading it. So while we're waiting for the DJ to get the slides up, I just want to recognize that we have Amir and Emily Abu Shair in the audience with their daughter, Aliyah. Hi, Aliyah. Future Dos Pueblos High School student. What if she wanted to go to a different school? You're okay? Okay, that's good parents. And then Daniel and Sandy from DPEAF, which is the foundation, and... Okay, and Liz from the foundation. It's really important that they're here, and I'm going to invite them to come up and speak on 2 different parts of this slide deck. So this project has been in production for 15 months, roughly. Goes back quite a ways. And so the history of this project, and recognizing that Ms. Ford and Ms. Munoz were not on the board when this project was launched. The first board report was November 2018. I did include the MOU that was adopted by the board back then, but just to catch everybody up and also to update the board. And I'm going to invite Amir and Emily to speak to this first slide, because they came to first, I think it was Bill Woodard, and then eventually to me and said, hey, we have an idea to take the $5 million portable replacement allotment and then apply for a CTEF facility grant. And then they proceeded to just create this grand vision. And so this $5 million investment, as of today, is now a $15.9 million project. I'd say that's some pretty serious return on investment, as they are so fond of saying. And so I just captured 4 things that this program is going to do, but I would like you to just hear briefly from Amir and Emily the vision behind this. 5 minutes, please, and then I'll let the board ask them questions when we're at this point. So,
think I'm going to briefly, because we have two new members, help to understand what we're really thinking. And we have limited time, so I'm going to extend an invitation to all of you. We're going to reach out to each of you individually because this vision is really complicated and nuanced and really unique to really anything that's ever been done before. And so at the core is effectively this. It's reimagining what a school can look like and reimagining the way that we enable students to showcase their work. And I think we do a great job with sports. I think we do a great job with some of the arts. But I think these core subjects that really are the foundational kind of knowledge that leads to a lot of the types of jobs and the types of careers people can go into, those are worthy of being showcased as well. And we've found a novel way through the work that we do with our students, and ultimately we're going to work to spread this to other school programs to create professional work that really is enticing and worthy of the community coming in and viewing and engaging with that work on a regular basis in an exhibition space. So it's not like an art show or a one-off thing. It's really about in perpetuity showcasing the constant process and flow and creation of student work. And we think this is a revolutionary idea, and we're excited to be a part of it. I'm going to let Emily talk.
And it really came, I mean, we, as visions do, they evolve with time and as new information is introduced. And truly, it was born out of something really innocent, that we knew that those portables, there was a collection of portables on Dos Pueblos campus that needed to be replaced. And so the $5 million of the bond money was allocated toward that. And there was some interest and excitement at Dos Pueblos High School to consider, well, what could we do if we weren't just replacing those portables? What could we do if we had more money, and where would we get more money? And then we figured out a way to maybe get more money through the Career Technical Education Facilities Program grant funding through the state. And the reason that that's significant to bring up is that, as Amir was mentioning, career technical education is a really exciting place in public education right now, where a lot of innovation is possible because it's unconstrained in ways that traditional subjects, I think, are more constrained, is basically what I'm getting at. And Dos Pueblos was uniquely positioned to get behind this idea and behind the vision for this facility because our SLT, our site leadership team, adopted an instructional focus on student engagement that was really rooted in all disciplines, all teachers on campus embracing and embarking on implementing project-based learning opportunities into their classrooms, both within their unique disciplines and also in a cross-disciplinary fashion. And we've been working on that for a few years. And our career technical education programs at Dos Pueblos have really been at the forefront of that, because at the heart of career technical education is project-based learning. You're talking about culinary, you're talking about automotive, you're talking about computer software, coding. All of these types of programs are really about doing the work and that being embedded in projects. So the Dos Pueblos High School community really got behind this vision, and we were able to apply for that funding through the Engineering Academy program, Career Technical Education, and also through Media Arts.
There's so much.
It also may make
time.
a little more sense after you present for us to talk just for a few minutes after that.
Sure. Okay. Cool.
All right, thank you. So some of the budget history, the early on estimate, and we were early in the design, was 17.2 million before we actually sat down with architects. That was our project goal. And then in the MOU that was updated and board approved in November, we brought a new project estimate, was 14.9 million. And then today we are bringing to you a current project estimate of 15.9, and that number is embedded in the addendum to the MOU, because that number is really important when we get to opening the bid day. We're all going to be really anxious about what that number is. And we're hoping it's lower than 15.9. Then we'll share in the cost savings. If it's higher than 15.9, we have agreed to share the cost excess 50-50. Okay? So that's our current estimate of what we think the building's going to cost. We are mindful, though, that the construction environment right now is inflation. I mean, there's just been a lot of escalation of costs, I would say, in the state, but also Santa Barbara. All right, there is a paragraph in the narrative that talks about leaseback. We have been using this for the last couple years. The narrative did talk about some changes in the state laws around the use of leaseback, and that's making it problematic for us to use in the context of Santa Barbara. It really is starting to limit some of the subcontractors who can be part of bidding. And so we have already informed Skipper to stop all pre-construction services, that we are going to take this project out to bid. Skipper's welcome to bid on it. We expect them to do that, but we will welcome all bidders. All right, so now comes the budget and now the fundraising part of this. So we are working around a budget of $15.9 million. We should get DSA approval almost any day. All right, and that's a really important step. I commented very lightly, there's a clock ticking on the CTEP grant money. So when they said, yes, you are approved for that, we have 12 months to get DSA approved plans. And we're going to come in with about a month to spare, or maybe 3 weeks. Okay, so we have been hustling to get this into design, into DSA, and it's going to come out at the right time. And so when we get those plans, we are going to go out to bid in October, and we will probably close the bid, I think we decided early December. And it's at that point that there is language in the first addendum that we're going to consult both DePeef and the district, because if it's a number that's beyond our ability to fund, then we need to agree about pause. What do we do with the project? So they wanted assurances that we weren't just going to go forward and sign the contract, which makes total sense. Through many conversations and really, I would say, just great partnership, that we have agreed to split any cost overruns 50-50. We probably could build a very detailed spreadsheet and get it down to the dollar, but in the spirit of collaboration, we've just agreed 50-50 on the cost overruns. There is a clause in there that if DePeef initiates a change to the project, they will bear the full cost of that. If the district initiates a change order, we will pay for all of it. If it's something in the ground that none of us knew, then we're going to split those 50-50. All right, so back at all these board reports, we have just shared the fundraising team. So we're blessed to have Linda Weinman in our local community. For those of you that don't know Linda's background, she created and founded lynda.com, which is just a global job training website, and she's just a very gracious, generous benefactor for all of us in this area. She has been running point on the fundraising. Amir and Emily have been in many, many, many conversations. And then Sandy Seal was the longtime president of DePeef, and she keeps trying to retire, but then we keep pulling her back into meetings. Daniel is the current president, and I would say there's great partnership there. But in our last meeting, this group agreed that they are ready to support and commit to a $6.4 million fundraising goal that they are going to sign to. I just want you to appreciate that, everybody, school board, community. That's a lot of money. And so I just wanted to give Sandy and team just a chance to comment on it, because when they speak, I think you will hear the cautious confidence that they have.
Well, I think what's exciting is before the 6.4 million, one of the reasons we were able to, we've met that at this point. So we have pledges from folks that are, yeah.
Okay, so we did tell the superintendent, we have signed pledges of $7.25 million towards this project. So yes, we're ready to go, green light.
And coupled with the 4.2 million that Emily and I were able to work with John Dent to secure, that's where all this, that's the whole leveraging that Carrie was talking about. We started out with 5 million, able to bring in 4.2 million from the state, and because of that partnership already on the front end, that was able to inspire the donors to come in and support us in that way. And so they're very excited about the innovation that's happening here.
Yeah, it's been. I will never say this is easy, but it's been a pleasure. You know, it's a great town and a great collaboration. So thank you.
I think just on behalf of the current DPAF board, we've really appreciated working with the superintendent in this process and the whole team that's been behind this building. As he mentioned, it has definitely been a hustle to complete everything, dot our I's and cross our T's, so that everything's ready to go for the grant funding, and we look forward to bringing this project to completion.
And of course, this facilities project is the culmination and really the convergence of so many things over so many years. As many of you know, Amir and I actually graduated from Dos Pueblos High School in the 1990s. So some could say that this journey started then, but I would say that it officially started when we began teaching at Dos Pueblos in 2001. But a lot of things and a lot of people and community members have participated over the years, and it has led to this, which will launch us into the next chapter. And there's 3 important groups that I think Amir just wants to address really quickly.
So one of the things that we're really excited about and that really got this thing kicked off was we met with one of our supporters, and they really expressed the following sentiment. They said, everybody thinks that all innovation is happening in Silicon Valley. There's all these startups, all these educational organizations, you know, all these initiatives being funded by Google, by Facebook, et cetera. And they were really excited about the idea that Santa Barbara can be a hub of innovation. They're really interested in this idea that Santa Barbara has all of the same types of ingredients and has a significant philanthropic base. And that if we can work in a way where this district can demonstrate its appetite for innovation, that we really have this kind of endless opportunity here of just getting and obtaining this kind of support to be really a catalyst and a transformative catalyst for education. And that's what we're excited about. What are the other? Now you go to the next point. Yeah, and then I guess the last piece of this is that we've been piloting a lot of this, and I know it's complicated and nuanced, but I just want to express, like, we're trying to prove that we can create professional quality work with students, and we're trying to prove that we can not only spread that at the high school level, but all the way down into the elementary and have all of this going like this. And at this point, we went to a conference for children's museums, and we took our students and the work there, and we presented as a company. We didn't even present as a high school. There were 80 vendors presenting professional quality exhibits to museums from all over the world. And people came into our booth and people openly wept. These were museum professionals that were looking and saying, our goal to connect the formal and the informal education has been something we've been working on forever. And to see that in a school setting with students, you can create work that is competing on the same level as all of these professionals. And that's really what it boils down to, is a belief that we have in young people. And if you want to get to like the core vision here is this: we have students with us from K all the way through 22. And I think that we don't give credit to what their time is worth. And I think the types of work that we can do with these students, we underestimate that. The youth all the way to the K. We almost say, wait and sit in a holding pattern, and when you're 23, then that's when the real world starts. And I want you to think about recapturing all of that energy and that work in like a carefully and thoughtfully planned out way, so that you can leverage that to change and influence the community. And that's really at the core what this project is about transforming the way we think of student time and what students are capable of, and demonstrating to the world what is possible and what kids can do. And I just gave a talk to our kids. I said, I believe in you more than everybody believes in you. No one really knows what kids can do. And it's incredible, and I think we don't give kids enough credit, and I think it can go, we're doing it at the high school and everything, that's where it has to start. It can start all the way at the beginning. It really can. And so we believe this is going to be a catalyst for that, catalyst for change, and we're excited to do that. I think I've said more than I have time
School board members, you'll have opportunities during every school year to go see the work of students. They do a showcase in May, but I'm sure that they would love to have you visit any time, so feel free to reach out directly to Amir or Emily, and they would love to show you the student work. It is amazing. I mean, it's on display at museums up and down California now, and so this work's going to spread. All right, I'm going to take us now into some practical considerations. So where are we going to find the extra resources to close the budget gap? I included in the narrative that we have a technology fund of $5 million in Measure I, and we think that is more than ample to cover the technology needs, and that we're comfortable transferring funds from that fund into this project. And at some point, we will get you a technology report about what those infrastructure costs are. But I suppose, spoken with Mr. Rickman, he says $5 million is more than ample to cover our needs. And that's just for the secondary schools. We also have a tech fund in the Measure J bond budget to take care of our elementary. So we are very comfortable recommending this to you. All right, so the MOU, there is an addendum, and it's about a couple pages, had a lot of specifics. We actually wanted to codify some of the agreements that have transpired over the last 6 to 9 months, codify the 50% split of anything over 15.9, is that the right number? Over 15.9. And that this group will come back and present some kind of documentation about the signed pledges that they are ready to commit to this project going under contract. You'll notice that there are 4 tax years that were captured in that MOU because it is work getting this level of commitment. So it's really going to take from, let's see, 2019, 20, 21, and then the tax year 2022. We believe this project is going to take about 2 years to build out. So we presented the MOU for your review. We're not asking for your approval tonight. We want to attend to any of your questions, and then we'll bring back that MOU for your approval at the next board meeting. So what questions do you have?
Board members,
Or comments?
questions? Ms. Ford?
I was wondering if I could ask you guys, what actually did you present to the Children's Museum's directors?
Amir, yeah, you got to go to, because we're.
I know, you got it recorded and all that. We're making basically museum quality exhibits. So if you've ever been to the Exploratorium or Moxie, we make exhibits with our students like that. And so the reason that that's kind of, I guess, overwhelming to these folks is that ruggedized exhibits that can stand kids beating them up and last. Like we had an exhibition of 6 or 7 exhibits in Moxie that went through what was it, like January through April last year, and we've been vetting this process. And so that was what we were bringing is student-created exhibits, set up in a typical kind of booth that you would have at a convention, and then just placing it as if it was just, effectively a corporation that's doing the same type of thing. And so that was what moved people so much. And the moving part is, they're going. The premise behind this is this: these children's museums are trying to inspire folks, as are we. And the whole idea is, if you have an exhibit created by kids, and then young people are playing with that and engaging with that, and in addition to that, you put content with that, where they can see that who are the kids. Like we have video content that goes with it, and that's again with the partnership with the media program. So you can now have a young kid who sees an exhibit, and instead of it being built by some 50-year-old dude in Arizona, for example, it's being built by the people in their community. And so this is the transformative impact: is you've now got a 7 or 8-year-old looking at the work of a 16 or 18-year-old and realizing like they could do that someday. And it's that's what we brought. So that's the whole thing. Yeah, and the exhibits, Sandy's bringing this up, I used to teach physics. The exhibits teach physics, teach science concepts, teach engineering concepts. They're interactive. So, and again, we're really, with the reality is this: we would have invited you sooner, but we're just so cautious about the whole fundraising. With the fundraising tipping over, we now feel like we can share this as a true vision instead of a hypothetical. It gets tiring sharing it as a hypothetical. It's stressful. you just build your anxiety, and we're at the point now where it's not a hypothetical. We can do this. This community can come together and make this happen. We have the resources, the excitement, the enthusiasm behind it. And so at this point now, we really want to get down and into the details and really invite each of you to spend substantive time understanding this, because what we're talking about is something that has never been done. It is totally unique. It is borrowing from the lessons learned from places like High Tech High in terms of authentically demonstrating work. But what it's doing beyond that is it's just the perpetual professionalization of it. And it's about inviting people to see process. And it's about, again, leveraging these high school students to be interacting with the younger folks throughout the year, and really taking, having meaningful educational experiences. So, their community service, their schoolwork, and is all directed toward the community. And we're recapturing that in a very targeted way with the goal of inspiring and changing the way people think and the opportunities that young kids see that they can have.
Thanks.
That was a long answer.
Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I just wanted to, just to say how exciting this is. And I know when you first brought it forward, one of my comments was really how are we going to bring the youth, the younger kids, into the process? So it's not just a high school focus, but really a pathway that's defined clearly for students to see the opportunities for them to go forward. And I love the fact that that has continually been weaved in this process and brought forward, because I think that's the clue, is for students to see that anybody could have this opportunity and get involved and get excited about those types of opportunities. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and all of the hard work that you have put into it. It's extremely exciting, and I would love to come and visit again. I know I was there a year ago, but I would like to learn more about your ideas too, about how you see that pathway formulating going forward as well. So thank you.
Ms. Munoz?
Yeah, so also very excited, and I love the sharing, of this, and having your daughter here is just amazing, just a statement in and of itself. Both of my daughters went to Dos Pueblos, and my oldest daughter was in the media program and is an accomplished, graphic artist as a result. So I think, the mentorship and the ownership that it gives them and the self-esteem is just, just amazed by how much you've accomplished. So I'm very supportive. I'd love to visit.
I'd just like to add, echo the comments of my colleagues, how exciting this is and how innovative this is in terms of this community coming together and being able to do this. And I just wonder, we're going to create so much enthusiasm around it, knowing our younger kids can realize that they can do something, or we're going to have the capacity to bring on all these kids. That's probably a future problem, but that's a good problem to have, right, in terms of that. But I do have a question with regards to us sharing the 50%. So are we doing that to an up to amount, not to exceed amount, just not a top ceiling? Or
I would say we talked directly, indirectly about a not to exceed, and I think if we had put a number in there, it really is based on market conditions. I think we also didn't want to put a not to exceed because, remember, this is going out for public bid. Mm-hmm. And so we were very mindful about the numbers that we put into all these documents. Even putting that 15.9 is a clue to the contractors that, oh, okay, so there's a number. Now, it's a good thing it's competitive because they have to compete against each other. I think what you will hear from all parties is, there's a point at which this project, if it comes in really high, we have to sit down first. How do we rescope this thing and then bring a recommendation to you? So we don't, in our minds, in our conversations, we have numbers that we're going, okay, that's too much. But we think the bidding environment's going to be fair. We think it's going to be within range. So, but know that you get preliminary review and final say when the board is approving the contract.
Any additional comments or questions? Well, thank you for coming and continue to look forward to this. I remember when you very first came and I was like, what is happening? Now I'm much more informed about that, so I appreciate as you bringing us along the way, so thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll go to F1, report on Measure I and Measure J summer projects. Mr. Vizzolini.
Actually, we have,
You have
excuse
comment?
me,
Okay.
we have one public comment.
Okay.
Mr. Frank Stevens.
Oh, thanks.
I will be brief. I was hoping to follow Steve Vizzolini because I know he'll give you an excellent report, but that's not why I'm here this evening. I'm here basically to respond to yesterday's news press. I'm sure you read it about the Santa Barbara High School Stadium. John Wayne Western, as a leader of the troops, he continually made the comment, "Don't apologize, it's a sign of weakness." I don't accept that. I think there's a time and a place to apologize. And with that in mind, I would like to say this. There's been a lot of delays, justified. There's been a lot of problems, a lot of heart-rendering decisions that had to be made towards Santa Barbara High School. My knowledge of what's gone on says at the end it's going to be an excellent project and make the community proud. However, at the present, I know 2 graduations students missed in the traditional stadium. They'd hoped to go through that. I know the athletic teams have had real problems on rescheduling a lot of their events, which is unfortunate. I know it's now saying November. I'm hoping that we can ensure the students, the staff, the parents, the alumni, and the Santa Barbara community at large, that starting with the second semester of the 2019-20 school year, they can start planning a traditional stadium graduation, and the teams that are on that stadium can start planning their schedules to be in the stadium. I'm hoping that that will be the case with all the delays that we've had and the wonderful work by Steve Vizzolini and group in trying to reconcile those. I'm confident that the second semester will see that. And with that in mind, I'd like to thank the patience of all the stakeholders at Santa Barbara High School up to this point and say, thank you for your patience, and I'd like to be sure that the Bond Oversight Committee is on record of apologizing for the delays, something that had to be done, but it did put them at some real heartbreak and disadvantage. So with that, thank you for the time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Right.
Good evening again, Board. Summer is over, school has started, and I wanted to, we wanted to present the Board with a bond project update to catch you up on where we are. Tied into our last speaker, our biggest project is Peabody Stadium. This is what it looks like recently. There's a number out there that I'd like to clarify. So this 93% number is a little bit misleading, and I would like to apologize to the Board for not correctly describing how that number works. It's important to understand that there are actually 4 contracts at Peabody Stadium. The current contract is with AMG Associates to do the site work and build the grandstands, do all the concrete work around, to do the storm drain and all that. And it's very important to understand that that is very close to being done. So we're going to be handing off the field to the second contractor, which is Field Turf. They're going to get started on this field very soon. So we're anticipating in the next, hopefully, like 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not like this is waiting for the stadium project to be done and then we begin the turf and the track. So it's just important to note that the other 2 contracts are for landscaping and for the track itself. So those things are important to understand. There's some more pictures. You can see here that we've got the landscaping is going on, so we're moving. There's some progress going on there, and I think we're moving on. So we're trying to get it done as fast as we possibly can. The next biggest project, Santa Barbara Junior High. This is a little bit blurry. I apologize. This is from De La Guerra Street, but I don't know how many times you've driven by this view, but there's 2 buildings missing. So this shows what the back of the main building has always looked like, and we're encouraged. On the left side, you can see the temporary lunch shelter that was constructed that has power and it has data, it has security cameras. The food service program was worked greatly, and everything was ready to go first day of school, so we had no impact on the school as far as serving meals. We've also relocated the locker rooms from the demolished building to a couple of large spaces near the Coda Street lot. So those temporary locker rooms were also in place for day 1 of school. So we're moving on, and we're very excited about that project. In fact, next week they're going to start driving the first pile. So you can see this tall mechanism here. They're going to be driving 100-foot piles in the ground. So that's very exciting. After a very long delay with seismic issues and liquefaction and floodplain, this is the Las Flores Children's Center. It's complete. You can probably make them out. This first part of the roof is not what we're talking about, but above that are the solar panels, which are functional at this point. They got a new playground, they got a reworked playground. They have solar panels, they have air conditioning. They now have off-street parking, which they never had before, so that's a big benefit for them. They were parking on Bath Street and fighting for parking spaces every morning. So we're pretty excited about that being done. They're also getting new furniture as part of this deal, so it's a big deal. So completed projects, we have Cleveland and Washington multi-purpose rooms. 2 different theories there. So we always communicate with site administrators about what they think the space should look like inside. At Washington, they wanted to have kind of a warm blank canvas to work with, to put their student work on the walls and achievements and things like that. And so it's more of a subdued finished product, but it looks wonderful. At Cleveland, Gabe's idea was pop. He wanted to really make this an exciting, impactful space for his community, to show them that the district's interested in what they're doing. So this first slide shows the renovated stage area, which used to be 50s era, wood paneling. And here's the big pop. So we got new lighting, we have new painted ceiling, we have matching floors, we have brand new, really exciting tables, and they're thrilled up there. So we really are very happy about the way that this turned out. Dos Pueblos High School student parking lot was a real big problem. It was in just horrible shape. It was unraveling. There were no parking spaces identified. The flow through the lot was horrible. So we were able to do a complete overlay, grind it off, re-overlay, nice new striping. This was a big bonus for the school and the staff. We added a new drop-off area that's ADA compliant, and this really aids. They've redirected traffic flow, so it's Mr. Woodard is very happy with the way it turned out. Playground at Adams School. Most of you are aware that this was a big thorn in our side toward the end of the school year, so we made this a priority, and this is same idea. This is during construction, so it's obviously cleaner than that now, but they got an overlay also. You'll notice that there's quite a bit of striping on this. We worked together with their PE staff and with the site administrators, and we created quite a bit of physical activity space. So they have a running track, they have a bike track, they have lanes for sprints, they have lots of different things that they do there. An additional thing, because this came in under budget, we were able to connect the dots. We had new fencing at the top where you see when they did move the portables around for the library. At the other end, at the bottom near Earl Warren, we had new fencing from our drainage project behind the portables. So we were able to connect the dots. So they now have brand new fencing across the whole back of the school, and we were able to add some high fencing in the areas where they have a lot of balls going over the golf course. So that was their request. A few other completed projects that aren't quite so glamorous, so I didn't give you slides for them, but the boiler and heating system replacements at Peabody McKinley are complete. So they are in their rooms. There's no more banging and crashing. When heating systems come, they're going to have a brand new heating system that works for both of those schools. Dos Pueblos High School got a new dust collection system in their wood shop, which was really needed. The old system had ductwork underneath the slab in the concrete, and it was failed. So pieces of wood and sawdust and things that get stuck in there, and they couldn't pull any of the sawdust out of the air. So we were able to replace that, and we were also able to put the ductwork suspended from the ceiling and redo all of it. So they were able to reconfigure some of their space and make it work better for them, and get new equipment and get new systems hooked up to them, which came out very, very well. The last one that we'll talk about under this category of completed projects is the San Marcos High School I-Wing. We had a safety issue there during the winter. We actually had some ponding above one of the classrooms, and actually we evacuated the room and had to put pumps on the roof and get the water off of it. So we're happy to report that that has been completed. The sheeting off issue has been addressed, and now we're good to go with a brand new roof on that I-Wing. Some other projects, what we have here is a spreadsheet that you have seen before. I've modified it a little bit. I took off a bunch of the completed projects that you've seen now for a few board meetings, but the blue ones are the ones we've talked about that have been done. These are all completed this summer. So we have, in the purple here, we have what I call projects under construction still. So there a lot of these are awarded. So the two backstops at Dos Pueblos and San Marcos are ongoing. They are scheduled to be complete in time for the baseball season after the beginning of the school year. The intercom and PA system for Dos Pueblos and Goleta Valley Junior High School is underway. They're working off hours to avoid the class, as we spoke about in the last meeting. And we project they're going to be done probably early winter. So those systems will be up fairly soon. Boiler replacements at Santa Barbara High School and Santa Barbara Junior High. Santa Barbara High School is probably 90% complete. Main building is done. They're working on the gym and field house now, so that will be done in October. So we anticipate that that will also be done prior to heating season. So they're very excited about that, having gone through a chilly winter. Santa Barbara Junior High School heating system, they really got out in front of that. So Frank Skipper Construction started at that right at the beginning of the summer, and they were able to pull out all the old radiators, do all the abatement, do all the demo of the piping, all the things that caused all the impact at the other schools when we did this were accomplished over the summer. So now they're into doing underneath piping and things that are going to have less impact on the school. So that's a good outcome for us. Storefronts at Dos Pueblos High School. So we've awarded the contract, and we are right now kind of in a holding pattern, and the reason for that is that the window systems, the storefronts we're putting in are actually custom. They're not one-offs. They're a triple glaze. They have a privacy sheet in the center that Kelly Moore helped us figure out, so we have that visual impairment, but they're about a 12 to 14 week lead item. So we granted the contract so they could get that stuff ordered. So that's the reason we're waiting on that. The same holds true for this building. So the notice to proceed has been given to RSH. The same issue falls for this building. The lead time on the equipment is very long, so they're not starting yet. Believe it or not, this isn't related tonight. So we're doing abatement on the second floor and putting new carpeting up there, and that's why it's warm today. So it's not off from now for the next 2 years. It's off for the next week, and it'll be back on for a while until we actually shut it down again for the HVAC project. Projects on what I call on the horizon. So we all heard about the wonderful project at CTE Pavilion. So that's something we're very excited about. We got our letters from the California Department of Education approving the project just yesterday. And as Mr. Matsuoka said, we're expecting plans from DSA in the next couple of weeks at the latest. So we are actually working on our bidding schedule already. So we'll have a couple of alternatives that we'll have set up just in case, but we'll be ready to advertise as soon as we get approved plans back. McKinley Makerspace. So we had a bit of a challenge getting information out of one of the manufacturers that was chosen for the elevator. And so after changing to a different vendor after this time, we now have a pretty good feeling that that's all that's left. The upstairs space is designed, the staff has had input. It's now just a matter of a couple of structural details, and then we're going to go. So those will get submitted very soon. New classroom buildings at Adams, Cleveland, Harding, and Monroe. Couple of important issues here. Probably Monroe is the most important. We got budget pricing from our contractor, and it came in at $4.4 million, which is $1.4 million over our budget. And so we started doing some rethinking. At first, we started thinking about what could we do to lower the cost where we're going to do it. And it ended up being losing bathrooms, losing sixth-grade classrooms, and it became not even a doable project. It wasn't worth doing. And the driving factor there was that we were planning on putting those portables over next to Cliff Drive. Well, there's lots of challenges there with grade and with ADA access, and the site work is attributable to most of that cost. So we worked with the principal, and what we decided was we're going to go back to what we originally thought would be a good plan and put it up near the field where that other group of portables is. So we have a configuration that we're working with, and we think that that will create a really nice community environment with an outside learning area that's inside of a U that faces out over the playground and looks over the ocean. And we have a good feeling that the site costs there are going to diminish quite a bit. So that's kind of why we pushed the pause on that. Same thing with Adams. We ran into problems down on that lower field, and the grading problems are going to cost an enormous amount of money. So we're working with the school. We're going to continue. We've switched up the order. We're going to do the library building first so we can get under construction there, and then we're going to redo that map. And if board wants to see that, I'd be happy to send you some renderings if you'd like to see that, maybe in a Friday letter or actually an email, whatever you prefer, or I can bring it back next meeting. And then we're continuing to work with Harding and with Cleveland. And the other component there is that Mr. Matsuoka, myself, Fernando Garcia, and our architects all recently went through a seminar about, learning environments for tomorrow. And what we learned was we could do a better job of incorporating teachers and site administrators and students and parents in what does this really need to look like inside. And so before we go, get all this work done and then find out, oh boy, we didn't think that through well enough. We decided to push pause for a brief period, maybe a month or two. We're going to meet with all of our stakeholders, and we're just going to get their input. And so hopefully what we want to get from them will be affordable, but we will certainly try to incorporate whatever they come up with in their new design and make this a, kind of a new classroom environment, learning environment. Also on the horizon are restrooms at San Marcos and Santa Barbara High School. Those are in the final stages of design and should be submitted to DSA within the next probably month. So we anticipate both of those projects being done this coming summer. What else do we have on there? Roofing. So we have quite a bit of roofing on our bonds. We got some here. There's even some further on our list. So what we're doing right now is we spent the summer with our roofing consultant and we evaluated roofs all over the district to try and figure out what condition they're in, prioritize them to inform how, which of these need to go first. So those are some of our challenges, but we're working on roofing. We're going to be trying to do those as we go. So in conclusion, we have 70 projects identified. We've finished 28 so far. We have another 6 that will be completed by the new year. A bunch more after this are already in design. So we're feeling like we're doing pretty good work and we're moving along in our bond program. So I just wanted to give you that update and ask you if you have any questions. Comments?
Any comments, Ms. Capps?
Thank you so much, Mr. Pizzolini. I really appreciate this update, and whenever you do these, I think it's always a good idea especially because this was, taxpayer supported, and having worked on that measure back in 2016, it's just important to communicate back to the public. And so I'm in full support of these reports and any kind of communication that comes out of the district, anything that we can do in our schools to give people an update about what's happening. My question is about the conference you attended, and you spoke to that, and I certainly applaud the initiative to get more stakeholder input. I'm just curious if there was models that you saw there that you could present to stakeholders to generate ideas, or is it really just more of an open process?
It's a little of both. I mean, the idea is that we don't know what they need. There are definitely models out there that show what has been successful,
Sure.
But one of the driving factors was you really need to involve your group to figure out what it is they need in their classroom, because what they came up with that worked in Sweden may not be the same thing that we need here. But what we did see was a lot of open floor space, a lot of collaborative work, less of, none of this with a desk in front of it in rows in a classroom. What we saw was people think better and outcomes are better when they work in groups, smaller, when they have the ability to move around, both inside and out. So it was very empowering. We got quite a bit of good information. They had a couple of great speakers that were just really dynamic, and it really got our attention because when we got there, we thought they were going to help us fix our plans for Monroe and finish them up, and we get them submitted. And what we came up with was, wow, we need to rethink this. So it was very rewarding, and I think it was very worthwhile to go.
Well, thanks for that report. Appreciate that comment. Thanks.
Ms. Ford?
I was just going to say that I'm really interested in the 21st century classroom projects and designs also. I think there, as you said, there's so much research out there that actually shows that if you change the environment, the instruction changes. You don't have to wait for instruction to change and then change the environment. So I think it might be wonderful for the board and the community to actually see what some of these successful changes in classroom design look like, because they kind of blow your mind a bit. And yet every teacher I know that actually had an opportunity to change the way their classroom looked, it just became a snowball effect, and every teacher wanted it.
Yes.
So I'd love to see a little bit more at some point
Okay,
when
sure.
you have
I'll
an
put together a
opportunity to do
little
that.
slide deck, and we can talk about some of the different places that we saw, and I'll find some more spaces for you to look at.
Thanks.
Any more comments, board? Okay. I too echo Ms. Capps in terms of this report. It's really enlightening, and I think I appreciate the transparency and you know, expressing the challenges on our way to a successful project. And so I appreciate that. And the more we can communicate out there where we are, with challenges and also our successes, the more I think that people are going to be able to understand fully the process and what it's going to take to in the end have great facilities. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move next to F2, evaluation of secondary school-based mental health. Dr. Wagner.
Good evening, Ms. Sims-Moten, board, it's Mr. Matsuoka. Very pleased to bring to you this thorough evaluation that was completed to look at our mental health services in our secondary schools. I do, before we talk about the evaluation itself, want to point out a few the key pieces, and that is that our secondary school-based mental health model, in partnership with Family Service Agency, includes a referral assessment and services model. That's the therapeutic piece. Also, Family Service Agency is our partner in the Signs of Suicide curriculum that's delivered in grades 7, 9, and 12 universally across the district. And what that means in terms of their piece of that is when students respond at the end of the curriculum to an assessment, it's FSA therapists who actually work with the students who come up as red and orange flags. The FSA therapists on our sites do crisis response. FSA is also one of the sponsors of the Youth Mental Health First Aid that literally hundreds of our staff members have already participated in. And then Family Service Agency also is a member and contributor to the Youth Well Coalition Provider Network. So Dr. Erica Felix and her team at UCSB from the Gevert School of Education conducted the evaluation, and they used a results-based accountability evaluation framework, and it's very simple. I like the simplicity of this. It's ask 3 questions. How much did we do? How well did we do? And is anyone better off? So how much did we do? We actually, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm using Costco readers tonight because I broke my glasses, but I'm going to do my best. This was actually broken down in terms of the number of sessions that that students were served in over the course of the year. Family Service Agency was the lead and provided the bulk of the services. There were 2,478, I hope I got that right, sessions held, grades 7 through 12. And then CADA was a co-provider in the realm of substance abuse counseling, and they provided over 700 individual sessions. You'll see here, and I chose this graphic of all the many graphics that were in the evaluation that you did receive, that it really breaks it down also by funding. I thought that was important to be able to see the number of students served and sessions based on the funding. So you can see Medi-Cal for mild to moderate mental health situations, but also Medi-Cal for moderate to severe. That's important because the therapeutic services that were provided did serve a range of students with a range of needs. Other school-based counseling, the funder, there's our contribution to the funding, and that along with the Cottage Health grant, which we have received that grant with FSA in 2 cycles now, and we're now going to be applying for a 3rd cycle on that. So how well did we do? First result is there were over 600 students screened in grades 7 through 12. Students were most likely to receive services by FSA or CADA rather than being referred out for off-campus services, but there were additional referrals made out. Result number 2, both students and parents reported a high level of satisfaction in the counseling that they received in the schools, and it was noted that they would refer their friends to these services. Result number 3, students who received the mental health services made progress on meeting treatment goals. And so treatment goals such as increasing self-confidence, taming their anxiety, etc. So students did make progress on those goals. Result number 4, students had an equal likelihood of treatment participation, regardless of their background, their demographic, or their symptom severity. So as I talked about earlier, regardless of whether they had severe mental health needs or they had more mild, they had an equal chance to participate, and regardless of their background, their demographic. And that was one thing that a lot of folks, that came up. Oh, you're only going to serve students who can't afford to seek services outside of school. We said, absolutely not. If a student on our campuses has a need and it's identified, we're going to refer them. And so it was good. You can tell I'm very excited by that outcome because we promised that, and the evaluation bears that out. So this is the most important. Is anyone better off? Did the students benefit? Result number 1 showed that students showed reduced levels of post-traumatic stress symptoms. However, the evaluation did note that students needed continued services. That makes sense. The average length, and I do have our partners from Family Service Agency here for your questions later on. They can correct me, but the average is about, the average length of services is about 10 weeks. And so students suffering trauma are not fixed in 10 weeks. So that did not concern us that continued services were indicated. The individual and group counseling services that were offered helped reduce clinical levels of depression. It was really good to see that the number of students with severe or moderately severe levels of depression decreased from 29% at pre-treatment to 21%, so an 8% decrease in that average of 10 weeks of services. The number of students reporting non-clinical or mild levels of depression increase. So that's what we wanted to see, students going from severe levels to mild levels or non-clinical levels. That increased by 20%, the number of students who are saying, I really don't have any symptoms of depression anymore. That was a huge outcome. Number 3, students were less likely to report experiencing suicidal thoughts following their treatment. The number of students reporting that dropped significantly. That was really important to see that. On our California Healthy Kids Survey last fall, 13% of our high school students and 11% of our junior high school students said that they had seriously considered suicide in the past year. More than 10% of our students in grades 7 through 12. So to see that outcome, that these services, and that's, I will take the moment right now to say that it was the public health crisis that we were experiencing 2.5 years ago that really kind of lit the fire under us to get this going. So to see that outcome is important.
Hey, Fran, can
Yes.
I interject? So that data point stunned me 10 years ago. And it comes at us through Healthy Kids Survey. We did something called Project Cornerstone in Santa Clara County, and you start collecting real data from our real kids. And that suicide rate nationally is about 10 to 12% of our teens have done some form of attempt. Now, here's something that's, I just want you to appreciate this. I mean, we've been through some challenges over at least my 3 years. But last year was a good year, right? I don't think we lost a student to suicide. And I have a quiet goal as a superintendent. Can we please get through this year without losing a young person to a premature death? And, you know, when it doesn't happen, you don't notice it, which is a good thing. But we now bear this burden of being like mental health providers to our communities. That's not something that school districts took on 20 years ago. But today it is, and I'm proud of our work. We have to continue to invest in this space because our kids need it, our families need it.
Thank you. And one last data point that's actually not in the evaluation, but we do track this. We began 2.5 years ago tracking, and since the contagion we saw 2.5 years ago, the rate has dropped 67%. So by comparison, 2 years ago, 64 attempts, last year 22. Still 22 too many. Result number 5, students who received CADA counseling showed a reduction in some risk factors associated with substance abuse. However, there was no statistically significant change in their 30-day alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana use. I don't find this shocking. When you look at research on recovery, 30-day rehab rarely works. It's just the beginning of a process. But we do want to look at that more closely. Result number 6, while students reported, this was good. Our students report high levels of prosocial behavior, both pre and post. We have good kids in our schools that want to be helpful with others. But over the course of treatment, there were statistically significant increases in their willingness to help. So while they were already good to start with, treatment helped them become even better human beings. And then result number 7, it is important to track the impact of mental health services on academic outcomes. That's our bottom line, right? It's too early to look at the students who received services last year because most of them were referred because they were struggling academically and/or behaviorally. And so we will be looking, and when we get to the recommendations, you'll see, we'll be looking at outcomes for those students this year. So moving on to recommendations. We do need to improve our tracking methods, and I met with our partners last week to talk about the recommendations. Primarily the recommendation, or the referrals out to our community-based partners in the Youth Well Coalition. So if it's not indicated that a student should be served on campus, the referral process is out into a variety of our partners in the community. We need a better system for tracking that and finding out how many students are receiving services. Second, motivating students and families to initiate services. I was thinking about this today. It really comes down to when you start a business, word of mouth is important. So it was good to see that families and students said that they would refer their friends to these services, but we have plans in the works to get the word out so that students know they can refer themselves. We also there were a number, not a small percentage of students who refuse services. That's not surprising. But what we need to look at through our deans, our program with our deans, is circling back with those students, especially if there are behavior or academic problems that are ongoing, and say, are you ready now? So we're going to put that in place. Coordinating academic counseling with mental health counseling. So students reported that maybe they didn't see an increase in their academic skills, and so working with our school counselors to make sure that they continue to check in with students and refer them to appropriate academic interventions while they're receiving services. Increase the participation in CBITS group by improving the accessibility. There is a commitment on our part to offer one of those CBITS groups, which have proven to be really successful at each of the high schools early in the second semester. Timing is everything, and that's one thing we learned from last year. Number 5, exploring evidence-based clinical approaches to reduce substance abuse. We talked about how to screen for addiction and substance abuse issues. Students who have high risk in those areas are going to be referred to Daniel Bryant off campus this year. Students who are less high risk will receive school-based services. And then finally, create a plan for the ongoing program evaluation. As I spoke of earlier, academic progress will be measured, so post-intervention measurement in academics. We're going to look at evaluating our referral process, and then finally, we'll be looking at the California Healthy Kids Survey to see if there's any movement in our data around mental health. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Lisa Bravo, who is the Executive Director of Family Service Agency, to come to the podium, and she and I can tag team on your questions and participating in the discussion.
Okay, Ms. Ford.
So any questions?
Yes, thank you. I think, Dr. Wagner, you might have skipped result number 4, which is the one I wanted to ask about.
Oh, result number 4?
Yes, it was after the suicidal thoughts.
I did skip that.
Just because I'm very interested in thinking a little bit outside the box, or trying to problem solve what's going wrong with the parent perception. Are there expectations out of unrealistic, or are there other opportunities to help these parents understand how progress happens and the needs of these kids?
And Dr. Bravo, you may answer as well. I would say one thing is that it's not uncommon to see change in one milieu before you see it in another milieu, and it could also be that there are things going on at home that are causing the parents to not see the change. So that's part of it. That's one thing we considered. What else?
Actually, I was just talking with one parent today about this very issue because I was wondering about it as well. And she said exactly the same thing. She has 3 kids at home, and she said that she doesn't necessarily notice the changes right away because the routine at home is different than the routine at school. So it would be seen earlier at school.
And I would also say that this is based on student reporting, so they may be sensing it in themselves, and the changes have happened internally, but they're not acting them out with consistently externally.
Thanks.
Ms. Capps?
Thank you. If we can go back to slide, let's see, the first set of results, how well did we do? I had a couple questions. Really about, I shared your, when we launched this, I shared, it seems, Dr. Wagnick, I shared your hope that this wouldn't just be utilized by a segment of our school district. I'm sorry, back to the, how well do we do? Let's see, it's slide. That was it. Yeah, there we go. So anyway, I shared some of your hopes that this wouldn't be a segment of our student population, but so it's really wonderful to have the results bear out that this has been across all demographics and even symptoms of severity. So I had a question about result number 2, and if that's a linguistic way in which surveys often ask, would you recommend a friend to these services, or are people actually recommending? Because that would be so powerful if students were telling their friends. That would be really fascinating to know that.
That's a very good point, and we could certainly add that, because right now it does say, would you recommend? It doesn't say, have you recommended?
Right, I think, again, it's a very small point in this large evaluation, but would seem a tremendous validation if students are actually taking upon themselves to recommend the services that they received.
This is actually being seen as an indicator of reducing the stigma of mental health, so that's wonderful.
Right.
And it would be really interesting to see that second question, have you recommended?
Thanks, yeah, thank you.
And I'd also comment that we didn't measure it or ask it here, but what we've seen, so anecdotally, in signs of suicide is that students are not, they might not be red flags, but they are sharing about friends that they're concerned about. So to that extent, we are seeing it.
Thank you. I'm just encouraged by these initial results, and I can hear it in your voice that you're pleased as well, and that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Comments, board members? Additional comments? Dr. Reed?
Just very briefly, I just want to acknowledge again the work that's being done, and going back to you, Dr. Wagnick, to really taking the bull by the horns in another area, in our mental health area. It's crucial, and it's obviously making a difference. And then having the evaluative studies that are evidence-based to really match up with what we're attempting to do and seeing that there is change is very inspiring. And just knowing that our students are getting the support that they need, or that they know that there are places to go and people to seek out to get that information. So I just want to acknowledge everyone here and just appreciate the work that's being done for our students. So thank you.
Ms. Munoz?
Yes, I, enjoy seeing like the recommendations and the improvement that has happened, not improvement, but the services that have been offered to our students, the value of screening, and the beginning, of this. I'm certainly familiar with how, at first, students, young people may decline services, but it's like planting that seed and then circling back. So that, the stigma is reduced, yes, maybe I do want to have you, help me, and I appreciate, everyone's dedication to this, to our young people.
Well, hi, Lisa. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
So I would like to add too. This is really good to see. We look back and said, how are we going to support our students mentally, as they struggle? And but the one thing I would say in our recommendations, and I'd like to see how we do that strongly, is we talk about our early start. We start to see these issues and behaviors coming early on. So I'd like to see how we can work together a little bit closely on that as the families that we look at. One of the mission of First Five is to ensure that kids are ready to enter kindergarten, but we're looking at not just academically, we're looking at how we focus on the whole child. How do we do that? And I'd like to see, in terms of the data, as we start to work more intentionally with those behaviors, both with the kids and with their families, how does this then track here on the end? Are you seeing less of it as they come into school? Are you seeing them strongly mentally and strongly more academically as a result of the early work in terms of that? So I'd really like to start to maybe lay the groundwork and foundation for that, so we can start to see that over the long term, how that early prevention strategies can impact this even further. So thank you.
So are you, just for clarification, are you calling for a longitudinal study?
Yeah, we'll talk offline on
Okay.
that. But yeah, seriously, in terms of that, that's really what we're looking at in terms of what we need to do, because that's the only way we're going to be able to see the effectiveness of the strategies that we're looking at right now. So I'd be interested in talking about that further. Okay. Additional comments? I think we're done with that. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
report.
Thank you, Board.
Okay. Okay, next we're moving on to Board. How are you doing? You're doing good? Okay. All right. So we will move on to F3, report on the California Department of Education, the 2019 Health Education Curriculum Framework. Ms. Carey and Dr. Ramirez.
Hi, good evening, Board. Pleasure to be here in front of you once again. It's also a pleasure to be able to bring this item to you for the first time in public session, have an opportunity to dialogue and discuss. We recognize that this is a topic that has understandably some important community interest. We want to recognize that that we want to ensure ultimately the wellness of our students, that we are able to educate them about how to ensure that they are developing as young people and ultimately as young adults. We also recognize that there is a discussion to be had and undertaken about how to take the recommendations of the state framework and then view them through our local context. And that is a process that we are intending to present here more broadly with some tactical first steps, but more so to develop awareness about what the framework entails.
Good evening, Board. We'll be inviting up directors and Dr. Ann Roundy Harder and Sierra Loffridge in just a moment to give you more detail, but we wanted to speak to some of what has come up in public comment about just the different questions and concerns around age appropriateness, and there are different implications for elementary grade spans and our secondary grade spans. So Dr. Roundy Harder and Ms. Loffridge, come on up.
Sorry, Ann, I have a headache and I couldn't say your name correctly.
Good evening, Board, and also I want to say good evening to our public. I'm Dr. Ann Roundy Harder, Director of Secondary Education.
And I'm Sierra Lockridge, the Director of Elementary Education. Thank you for having us here tonight.
So we're here to talk about the span of the services that are covered in the health framework for K-12. So that's why we're here together. We work very closely together on many things. You want to go ahead? And Sierra's suffering from a bit of a cold, so do you want me to do much speaking?
There we go.
Okay. So to give you a little bit of background, in May of 2019, of this year, on May 8th, the California Department of Education announced that they had a newly revised 2019 California Health Education Curriculum Framework for California Public Schools K-12. Now that's quite a mouthful, and it does encompass a lot of recommendations and guidelines. So one thing that's very important for you and our community to know is that the framework does not dictate curriculum. It is a guidance document. And so that's one thing that I think we need to really fully understand, is that it's providing guidance as related to our California health standards. So it provides guidance for what's to be taught to meet those health standards, but it is not in itself a mandate. There are 6 main components of the health framework. Some of these we cover already in some of our PE classes or some of our other classes, and some, as we will get into a little bit later, we need to do some updating on to meet the new requirements or recommendations. So the 6 elements are nutrition and physical activity, growth, development, and sexual health, injury prevention and safety, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, mental, emotional, and social health, which relates to our last presentation, and personal and community health. Every school district has the autonomy to choose its own curriculum as long as it meets the state guidelines for the standards. Now, in our community, as throughout the state, once we looked into the framework, there was some consternation in our community, in particular about one aspect of the framework, and that related to the California Healthy Youth Act, also called CHYA or AB 329. And in particular, the California Healthy Youth Act authorizes school districts to provide comprehensive sexual education consisting of age-appropriate instruction in any of kindergarten and grades 1 to 12 inclusive. And I'm just pointing out, I noticed there's a small typo that it should say 2016, not 15. So I want to note that it was 2016. It requires instruction for grades 7 through 12 covering HIV and sexually transmitted infections or STIs. And it includes a broad array of things within that area. So it does talk about social views of HIV and STIs and sexual activity. It does talk about prevention and contraception methods. It does include students' rights to access local health resources regarding sexual and reproductive health. It even includes information on dating and relationships with prevention of intimate partner violence, for example. And something that's kind of new for a lot of us is the concept of human trafficking. And so that's an area that many teachers don't know much about, and in fact our curriculum will need to be updated to address fully. One thing that's extremely important for us is that we want parents to know that all throughout the framework, very clearly, over and over, the language says parents should talk with their students, talk with their children about these things, and parents have rights, and parents have rights to opt out from the aspects of the California Healthy Youth Act. That does need to be in writing, and we will be in the process of developing a common form, because right now it's kind of been up to teachers to develop their forms, and we feel that it would be better to have one common district form that's aligned throughout the schools. So per the law, we are not allowed as a school district to require active parent consent, or what's called opt-in. We may not do that. It must be opt-out. So the language is very clear about that. We must notify parents at least 14 days ahead of the unit being taught, and we're talking about the comprehensive sexual health unit, not all units, including nutrition, diet, exercise, injury prevention, and so on. We inform parents in 2 different ways. So we do have language in our annual notice. Additionally, we also have the individual teacher notification I mentioned a minute ago about when the units will be taught. It doesn't have to be 14 days, it can be longer than that, but it must be no less than that. And parents have the right to review the curriculum, and I know that concern was raised earlier today, so we'll speak a little bit to that too. Is there anything else? Good? Okay. So where we are in terms of our current status with addressing the needs in the framework and the California Health Standards, we'll go through briefly, and I'm going to have Sarah speak to the elementary, and then I'll speak to secondary.
So currently, the Human Health and Development curriculum is taught in 5th and 6th grade. Parents are notified of this in the annual notice, and in the elementary world, we send out a letter home letting them know that they can opt out, and we have parent screenings about a week to 2 weeks beforehand, where parents can come in and actually watch the video. The video is called Let's Talk, and it is basically about the changes that occur during puberty. And we do separate the kids by gender and have teachers, credentialed teachers, facilitate those pieces with the help of our health assistants and, of course, our principals.
So in the secondary realm, I will point out that the CHYA, or California Healthy Youth Act, specifically addresses 7th through 12th. And so we have a little bit of work to do in that space to make sure that we're fully aligned with those recommendations and the law. So for secondary, in junior high health space, we need to re-implement some lessons. We used to have a health-specific course that we are no longer offering. So that is problematic, and we want to make sure that we're addressing that. So we have a plan to do so, to make sure that we're including the elements, including the California Healthy Youth Act requirements. So we have a junior high teacher who has over 20 years of experience in the health education field, has a health education credential, has worked in the domestic violence prevention space, has worked with CADA in terms of youth advocacy, as well as actually teaching health classes for us, and has worked at the junior high and high school level. So we feel that he is well qualified to help us as we are developing more curriculum to align closely with the California Healthy Youth Act and to re-implement our lessons. Oh, he's also bilingual, which is a plus, because one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is offer parent nights for them to review the curriculum. And although we haven't yet established those dates, we will inform you of when we plan to do so. They'll be in the spring, winter, spring, because we have some background researching and working and curriculum development that we want to work on. We do have a junior high board-adopted textbook. It's Holt's Decisions for Health, but because that book was published prior to the California Healthy Youth Act coming into play, we need to do some supplementing of our textbook. And so that's when we'll invite in our public and community to look at the materials and see what they are. I'm going to talk more in a minute about the next layer with curriculum, so we'll get back to that piece in a second. The high school, of course, as you probably know, already has a designated health class that's in fact a requirement for graduation, and that already includes the 6 components of health, as well as the California Healthy Youth Act required elements. And we have a health teacher professional learning community that has worked in that space already. So in terms of some next steps in addressing the new framework that has just come out, and I do want to encourage everybody to check out the draft of the framework. The CDE has not yet published the final draft, so the draft that's online has strikeouts and editing, grammatical comments and things like that in it, but for all intents and purposes, it is what our State Board of Education did adopt. And so that's at cde.ca.gov, and in the materials that you received, it's one of the links on your board report. So if you go to cde.ca.gov, and in the search bar, you can type for California Health Framework, it will come up, or you can also search for California Healthy Youth Act, and I believe if you even just type in CHYA, it comes up as well. And there's a frequently asked questions page, there's information there, and I really encourage our public to check it out so they can also be educated and informed. So the State Board of Education plans to release a new list of adopted curriculum or recommended adopted curriculum for grades K-8 in November of 2020. We might say, wait a minute, that's quite a ways away, and it is. What tends to happen is that the state will have standards In a different year, they'll push out the framework with the recommended guidelines. Then publishers have to scramble to respond to the new recommendations. Then they will push out curriculum. Our Santa Barbara County Education Office will then get involved with hosting publishers' fairs, and then we can actually get around to choosing new texts that we would want to adopt. So in the meantime, we are working with our currently adopted curriculum, and then, as I said, we'll be supplementing and sharing that information. So the Santa Barbara County Education Office is planning to host their Health Publishers Fair in early 2021. So as you can see, we will be returning and sharing more information over the next couple of years, because this is a lengthy process. We will work closely with our county office to review, develop, and implement the appropriate curriculum, of course, with input from school staff, parents, community, to review and deliver the updated curriculum to meet this California Healthy Youth Act, in particular in our junior high space that's sort of lagging behind the high school in terms of implementation. And then we will begin some input opportunities this year. So I know it's always a little strange to think, why is there such a lag time? But that's the process of the state. So we do our best to respond in the meantime. Just a quick comment, too, that Sierra and I both attend the curriculum councils that are held about every 6 weeks or so through the County Education Office, and that's how we became aware of some of these pieces, and we'll continue to do so and continue to use them as a resource for us. So I would like to open it up at this time to see what questions you might have for us, or comments.
Thank you for bringing this forward, because we have had a lot of public comment and these questions have been raised. I appreciate the fact that the district is going to take its time to really examine the curricula and to vet any materials that you want to bring into the classroom. But I think it's really crucial to state that parents have a wide range of viewpoints in this discussion, and that it's important and imperative that those viewpoints are heard and brought into the conversation. And I would suggest there would be a committee. You suggest a committee being formulated, but that there really would be a committee that provided opportunities for parents from a wide array of viewpoints to have their input and perspective, because there are strong feelings in this area. And I just feel that it's important to be inclusive in this process. I guess I'm just kind of repeating myself, but I really feel strongly that there is a process that you're going to incorporate and maybe share or reveal to us as to how that is going to go about. So I appreciate the fact that, it's a year or two away, but what are the processes that are going to be taking place? Like when are you thinking you might be formulating a committee? How are you going to bring together an inclusive group of parents so that these viewpoints can be heard and shared before you vet those specific pieces of the curriculum into the overall curriculum that you have?
Yeah, thank you so much for the comments. Couple things in response to that. One is we will be offering some parent education nights in, as I said, winter, spring. I say winter, spring because I'm kind of looking at, January to April, so don't know if you consider that all spring. I consider it winter, spring. And then as to the committee, we'll have to really think through that and what that means and who might be invited. I've definitely been hearing from parents and community members a wide array of voices in this area, from people who represent different community health organizations to parents who are newly entering into Santa Barbara Unified with their little ones in elementary school, to those who already have students in our system. So I've had the opportunity to hear from a lot of people either on the phone or via email, and continue to welcome that for sure. But we think it's really important to make sure that people are educated about what is and what is not, so so some of this I'm going to put on people to do a little research themselves if they're particularly concerned, hopefully to allay the concerns or to bring forward their questions from that informed place. But we will also be offering some parent education nights around the curriculum in particular, and also as to their rights as parents, to make sure they really understand that they do have that right to opt out their students, and that we do encourage them, not just because it's in the framework, but because we know it's the right thing to do, to have open conversations with their children about health. And health is so much. It's so much more than just this California Healthy Youth Act, although that's the thing that's getting a lot of buzz and is potentially, for some people, the most controversial. That's the piece I've heard the most about. I haven't heard about diet and nutrition. I haven't heard about injury prevention. I haven't really heard about tobacco and drugs, prevention of use of tobacco and drugs, let me point out. But it's really in this space, and we know that. And so we want to be sensitive to the fact that there are many diverse viewpoints here, and we want to make sure those are represented because, as the framework says, they're not mandating what we need to do. They're not telling us the curriculum that we must use. It needs to be within the local context. And so we know that, we feel that, and we understand that. And so we want to respond to that starting in this winter and spring. And then really it's going to be continuing for the next couple of years because in the K-8 space, what happens is that the state will put out a list of recommended curriculum, and then you choose among that list. It's different in the 9 through 12 space. The CD is very clear that there's a lot more flexibility. In the 9-12 space, they don't give you lists of recommended textbooks, for example, as they do for K-8. Let me say textbooks or instructional materials because, for example, at the elementary, we do have a video rather than a textbook that we use. So we do have a textbook for the junior high space, and then we'll be supplementing with some input from people as well. And that will be myself and then our teacher on release as well as our Ed Services team in general, getting input from teachers, parents, family members, and I'd really love to see students there too. I think it's extremely important that we have student voice in there as much as possible too for a committee or advisory board.
So I agree with you as well. Now, would that process be that these recommendations would be made and then you would, how would that unfold? You would share what the recommendations were to the community and then...
I think, to your question, I think there are going to be a few phases of this project because it is developing over a couple of years and we're actively keeping an eye on what the state is unfurling for us with the curriculum. So the first phase is really parent education and input about what is the law, what are the standards, what must we respond to, and then what do we have available as options for us right now, because the state hasn't yet released its new curriculum list, what can we do in the meantime? And so that's where we would be getting input from people before we move forward with implementation, particularly in the junior high space. And I don't know, Sarah, if you want to say anything about the elementary?
So, yeah, I would echo what Anne has shared in that when we do go to upgrade and update our curriculum, we would definitely welcome a variety of stakeholder input, and especially parents. And I want to also emphasize that currently we do offer screenings for parents of the instructional video. They have a chance to preview it. They have the right to opt out. It is a very basic animation of the changes that happen through puberty, and I believe firmly that it is developmentally appropriate and that people will not have a major issue with it. Should you be interested in seeing it, you can certainly reach out to me and I will provide you that link. And we really do need to wait until not only the framework is finalized, but that list comes through. And once that list of curriculum comes through, then we will take a pass at it. We'll talk to some of our team, our teachers, and then we'll bring it to you guys and to the community for input and probably look at a couple of different texts or resources to find out what is best to adhere to the law and to respect our community's wishes and boundaries, and also, most importantly, ensure that our kids have the information they need to grow up and be healthy adults and make wise choices and take care of themselves and their bodies.
So, thank you. So the questions that we've had from the public in public comment, for example, they've raised the fact that this is going to be implemented next year, which is not the case.
We will not be making changes next year to our curriculum. We are going to wait until the state board approved list comes out so that we will have a chance to vet it and make some curricular decisions with input from all of you and the public.
Great. I think that's really clear to state again and again.
Yeah.
To make sure the transparency of the rollout of how this is going to go in terms of implementation.
And I do want to clarify that it's a little bit different in the 7 through 12 space because we do have our board-adopted textbook that is slightly out of date. So we will be in a slightly different phase than elementary because we will need to respond to the California Healthy Youth Act because it is law, and it does include pieces like the sex trafficking piece that are not in the textbook. So we will be getting input a little earlier because we have to respond to that. So I just want to clarify that point.
Which is great, because then elementary gets to learn from her.
Thank you. I just appreciate that you're taking your time and which I know you all will do, and following a process that is inclusive of a committee that I think including parents and students and staff and people in the health framework. And just one last question. There was discussion bandied about around the San Diego curricula, that health curriculum that I don't know that you might be taking that up or looking at that. Does that?
I haven't specifically looked into San Diego curriculum, so I do have some websites and lists that offer a variety of different curricula to look at. I'm not in particular familiar with that, but I would certainly be happy to look into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Ford?
Thank you. Well, I want to draw the distinction between the Healthy Kids or the Healthy Youth Act and the curriculum, because the Youth Act is in effect now. And so I'm kind of concerned, but maybe I was wrong. Am I to believe that there is no instruction in sexual health and HIV prevention in the middle school or the junior high right now?
There was not last year, but there will be this year. So the law states that it needs to happen at least once in the middle school years, but for us that would be junior high, and then once in high school. So we're covered in high school, but what we realized with the framework coming out is that, as I said, we're slightly out of alignment in terms of that aspect, and that's where we need to have the supplemental information coming in. As I mentioned about, for example, the sexual trafficking is one of the newer pieces of that. So as we looked at our curricula, we went, oh, that's an area that we really need to add in and make sure that we are addressing. So it did not happen last year, but it needs to happen at least once in junior high. So it will be happening in 8th grade to make sure that we're capturing those students. And then the goal is that we probably will move towards a model where we have some aspects in 7th and some in 8th. And we're still working on that.
I think that's great. I also would just underscore that there's a lot of potential for this also to be addressed in SEL, that a lot of the act sort of interacts or discusses relationships and how we interact with people and how we learn to say no to things that we know don't feel right, etc. And so I do think that the Healthy Youth Act is going to be key to share with our community, because we've had comments about abstinence only, and abstinence only is not permitted in our schools. So that's why I think the whole issue of communication with parents is the key, and I thank you for the work that you're doing and the urgency that you approach it with. Thanks.
Thank you. I will point out that the framework does mention that abstinence is one of the options, and it is the only option for really reducing the risk for HIV and STIs. So abstinence is mentioned in the framework, but not as abstinence only. So I just want to make sure we understand that it is still in the framework as an option and a good option for prevention.
Right. I hope I said abstinence only.
Yeah.
Ms. Capps?
Thank you. Well, Dr. Reed actually asked most of my questions, so I'm good. I just, I think it's really clear, because there's been so much discussion about this. I'm sitting here listening to you, wishing that every, parent committee could have the same information, because I have just been hearing a lot of chatter. And so just, again, as I often do, encourage robust communication. And also, too, not just for, it sounds as though, if you have a child that's about to receive the curriculum, that you're able to see the video and all that, but really being assertive about allowing other people, maybe you're worried about it and your child is not yet in school, or just being as open and transparent as possible, especially because there seems to be some consternation around changes that haven't yet happened here, but they will be eventually. So
Absolutely, and even though we haven't yet established the exact dates for the parent education nights, as I'm calling them at this point, we know that we'll have several of them, because we know we have working families. We have some people who are working 2 and 3 jobs, and it's very difficult for them. So we want to make sure it's as accessible as possible. Of course, we would have translation for those evenings, and we may even look at a morning option for those who work nights so that they could still access it. And then, although our websites are still under construction, for the accessibility aspects, we are thinking about putting together an informational webpage as well related to
that would be
health.
Fantastic. I mean, as concise as possible, because again, I get asked, a drop-off situation, and I would love to just be armed with a little more. I mean, this was really helpful, and I feel more able to do that. But if you could even boil it down even further and put something out on the website, that would be great. Thank you.
I would also add that Anna's put together some frequently asked questions that we've empowered our school leaders, our principals and APs with. So if parents of families go to their site and have questions, those principals and APs will have that resource available to them that explains everything we talked about tonight and kind of the big picture.
Are those frequently asked questions somewhere we can?
They're linked in your board
linked in your
report.
board
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Ms. Munoz?
I just want to also, I share the concerns that my colleagues have, and I, appreciate the communication, and the more information we have for the community and for ourselves, the better. So I appreciate all your work and dedication to this.
Thank you.
And I would just add that I definitely think that, parent education is key. So having a 5th grader some years back, when social media wasn't as impactful as it is now, it's good to have some information, even in those uncomfortable conversations, but they are necessary conversations, because it allows you to also to engage with your son or daughter and get where they are, where their thoughts are. As difficult, as challenging as it may be, you get to see in that conversation where their minds are, where their thoughts are. And so I appreciate it even back then, in terms of those conversations. It's amazing what they think is and what's really going on. So I want us to continue to encourage and to give parents, confidence that this is something that if they don't talk about it, somebody else is talking about it. So I appreciate the time that we're taking to be very clear and transparent and informing the families in a way that they need to feel comfortable about it, as well as informing the site administrators what they need to do when those questions come up.
Thank you.
So thank you.
One of the phrases that's used throughout the health framework is medically accurate. So we want to make sure that our children and their families do have that medically accurate information so that they can make informed choices when they are having those discussions.
Appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I believe we are on our last report, board bylaws updates. Mr. Matsuoka.
All right, Mr. Rouse, I'm just going to let you drive files that I will need. All right, so first an overview, our backlog of board policies. And by the way, in the 9,000s and the zeros, it's called, 9,000s are board bylaws, because it's really policies that relate to the work of the board. And then the zeros are called a different name. There's actually quite a list. The backlog is, goes back quite a ways. I picked off 6 of them that were, easy to medium to tackle. There's some where I actually need to dig into it and think through some of the implications of it. So the budget cost is calculated for board training by CSBA. So just so you know that number's there. All right, so we're going to go through these. Number 1, tell you what, we may not need well, we probably will need to jump out to each board bylaw, but let me give a quick overview, and then we'll jump to that bylaw and take any of your questions, input, editing recommendations. So public statements. We receive them virtually every board meeting. We have a card that people fill out in the back. Board President Sims Moten and I, we had a conversation, I don't know, it was about 9 months ago, just to tighten up on some of the language. Sometimes people try to transfer their minutes to others. There's a lot of words on those cards. I think we can simplify it. So we are going to take it on ourselves, mostly me. I'm going to take a first cut at just what's our current language on the card, what are potential modifications. Wendy and I will work on a version, and then we'll bring back that suggestion to the entire board. So Brian, if you could jump out to the 9010. By the way, I leave the notes from CSBA for your first reading. We always pull those out when we get to the final versions. So the strikeouts and then the new language that's been suggested by CSBA. So did you see anything where you would like to make suggestions? Yes.
Thanks. I love the idea of sort of revising and clarifying the comment cards, but the phrase respectful discourse and procedure clarifications.
Yes.
I was just thinking that actually, rather than just having it be a change in what it says on the cards, that's a real opportunity, I think, for some community education. So it could be a board agenda item, I think, to really go through and say what it is, and then it's reflected on the comment cards. That was my only comment about public statements, board policy.
I agree with the sentiment and where you're going with this, because some of the topics that we receive, they can get pretty emotional and pretty heated, and I know that whoever's sitting in the board president chair has always tried to manage public comment in a respectful way. Sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. And I think as we head into the 2020 year, I think that's going to be really important for us to just set out expectations that in this room you can speak freely, but it does need to be respectfully. So I will try to capture your idea, put it into narrative, and I think it might be something that we say as part of our, public comment section.
Thank you.
Anything else on this one? Okay. Brian, if you'll go back to the overview. Next one is organization. The only modification that I have, and we'll jump out to the policy, is CSBA recommends that you adopt the board meeting calendar at the organizational meeting, which is December. I've always found that awkward, if not just like confusing, because you're halfway through the school year, and I've even had past boards where we were adopting the board calendar that began in the next month. I mean, you need to plan your calendar out like probably a year in advance. So I've always produced a board meeting calendar around the school year, because I think that's the way our brains work, school board members as staff. And we always put that out to you in January prior to the next school year. So I'd like to strike that number 2 and stay with our current practice of having you adopt the board meeting calendar roughly January preceding the next school year. So that's the only modification that I suggested. I left the original language in there just so you could see. Do you need to look at the policy? Okay, all right, so I'll strike that number 2 and we'll stay with our current practice. All right, board member electronic communication. All right, so there's language in here, so if Brian could jump out to it. I forget when the date of this and when it was presented by CSBA. in my mind, the intent of these policy statements and words have to do with, not violating the Brown Act through chains of email communication, which I know we've been trained multiple times by our consultants. This policy is silent about the use of devices during meetings. And so I didn't want to try to craft language because I wanted to talk with you about, I would say, our work on devices philosophically and operationally. So it's really great to have electronic agendas. I mean, I remember the days of paper, and we used to hand deliver a stack of paper to every board member's house, like on Friday. And then when there were changes, we had to scramble to get, new things. It's a lot of work. So electronic is really advantageous, but we're on screens, we're on devices, we need to focus. I know that we all kind of glance at, like, are the Dodgers winning? That's what I peek at once in a while. I think what I would like the board to have a conversation is our use of electronic communication during board meetings, because you can't have a conversation with somebody out in the audience because that would be obvious. But I have watched boards struggle with board members communicating with somebody out in the public who's in the room or even not in the room. And you don't really have evidence that that's happening, but it starts to lead to some, just awkward spots. So I would recommend that we have embedded in this, some recommendations that our use of devices is for the board agenda, and that we're just minimizing, the use of communication with people outside. I don't want to limit your ability to, texting somebody at home saying, okay, our meeting's running really late. I'm not going to get home by a certain hour. I don't want to be that, prescriptive. I'm often texting our cabinet, okay, some work assignments are happening from your comments. But I would encourage the board to think about some language about communication on devices, text, email, social media during board meetings. So I'll open it up to your comments.
Ms. Ford?
I know I read this, but where is it here in this policy?
Those comments about?
Yes.
I didn't write anything.
Oh, so you just did it in your summary?
And I put it very lightly because this is your bylaw. It's really your way of operating as a board. I've given you some thoughts and some experiences really over the last 10 years of, board members. Most are good. Sometimes board members are communicating with the public. And, you're voting on items in the public. And so I think some guidance about that is important.
Any comments? Or are you looking for a specific language from us, or?
I don't necessarily need language, but some guidance and direction. If you want me to I could look at other school districts to see if they've got some samples about the use of electronic devices during board meetings regarding communication with members of the public.
Ms. Ford?
Yes, I guess for me it would just be great if it's not necessarily directive, but just saying whenever possible or to the greatest extent possible, board members are asked to refrain from, rather than sort of making it sound very dictatorial.
Right. No, I completely hear you. I do a lot of communication during the board meetings. It's usually quick things because I have to pay attention, but I also don't want to miss the moment to I'm sending assignments out to our cabinet as I hear topics. So, and I know that they get a lot of work done over there too. So, but I hear the spirit of your request. It just needs to be gentle. Yeah.
Ms. Ford?
I also had one more comment question about this particular policy, but I don't know if you wanted to go through it in greater detail, and I'll wait for that.
Okay. So we could now go through this narrative. Sure. Okay. So is there a paragraph or a word that you want to?
My question is for the very last sentence. So if there's other stuff, we could certainly discuss it. But I'm I'm kind of concerned. It sounds, to me, that sentence sounds rather Big Brother-ish. And also, I think that the use of smartphones are used extensively. Our own personal smartphones are used, and it sounds like there's a request to refrain from ever using our personal devices. But I have a feeling that all of us use our personal smartphones.
You know, my sense is, as I'm looking at Todd as I make this response, I feel like this language is a bit dated. Here's how I'll take a pass at it. It really doesn't matter if it's a district-issued device or your personal device. Like, I use my personal cell phone for all of my work. What we've guided you towards is please do all district communication using your district email address. That's the important thing. So that language, it does strike me as a little bit old, maybe in the days where, I don't know, people didn't have a laptop to use. So we'll take that language and modernize it. You're welcome to use your personal devices. You do have district-issued laptops, which I think is appropriate. But the most important thing is just that you're doing district work on district email. Yep.
Thank you.
Good. Any other comments about that one?
Hearing none.
Okay, next one. All right, terms of office. Well, this one was kind of new to me. There's an assembly bill that passed fairly recent that determines that the swearing-in date must be the second Friday of December. Yeah, we well, it's very new legislation. It probably should have guided us maybe December of what would that be, 2018, when we swore in Ms. Ford and Ms. Munoz. This is going to be a little logistically, like, it's going to create just some calendar shifts that we can't swear people in on the second Tuesday of December. We have to do it second Friday. I think what we'll do is just a swearing in ceremony. I don't think people want a board meeting on a Friday. And then we'd have to move the first board meeting to the third Tuesday of December. All right, so that will begin in the year 2020. All right, so that's the law. So we have to now do swearing in separate, I think, from a board meeting. Okay. I don't know what the logic was behind it. It used to be pretty generous, like sometime in the first 2 weeks of December, you swore in your new school board members. But there you go, legislation. Any questions? Yeah, Ms. Ford.
Well, I was just looking at it because it did seem so crazy, but it actually says that you can't start, the commencement of your job can't start until the second Friday. So it seems like you could swear in sooner, possibly, and have it start that Friday?
You could,
Just
but
thinking.
in my view, I think when you're sworn in front of the public, you're like the board member who's now authorized to vote on district decisions. I mean, you wouldn't have any authority to vote on anything until that Friday. So I'm not crazy about scheduling our December board meeting the third Tuesday of the month because I think we're almost always in session with school, but that could start creeping later in the month. Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right, then the last two, no comments. The role of the president was pretty straightforward. Brian, if you could jump out to that one. Did you see any language in there that you'd like to comment on, edit? Yes, Ms. Ford.
Thanks. I just wondered if it, let's see, it would be, I guess just number one, this idea of calling such meetings of the boards as he or she may deem necessary. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to sort of give a tip of the hat to other board members requesting or desiring a meeting? Or is it inherently within that, for example, Wendy would take our requests and then she would decide if it was necessary? And we did have this issue.
Yes, we did.
So I'm kind of concerned about it.
I'm glad that everything's open for discussion in terms of, there's a lot of things that have been done just inherently, because they've always been done. So this is an opportunity to do that. I would think that taking into consider what the requests are, and I think we had a lengthy conversation with regard to calling special meetings for whatever in terms of that. So I think this is I don't see any problem with it saying that other members can call request a special board meeting, because it probably would be outside of the ones that we already had scheduled. So I don't see a problem with it, because it says deemed necessary, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we disregard the request from other board members.
True.
How would that process unfold? For example, I think what you're raising the question is if a board member requested a meeting, what's the process? It is that board member would go to the president and request a special meeting for discussion, and then the president would then discuss that with the superintendent? I want to understand the process.
Yeah, because there wasn't a process in terms of that. So that's, here again, we're in a place where we're making new territory. So what is it that we would like to see as a board? Ms. Capps?
I just, thank you for this, interesting. When I was looking at the agenda, I was kind of curious about the timing, because this tends to be the sort of discussion that we have in our board retreats with a facilitator who has experience with other boards. And so I'm fine. I don't have any substantive objections to this conversation, but it does seem more appropriate for a retreat when we're talking about protocols and working together. And I just have found that the facilitator that we've had in the past has been so helpful, because she sheds light on what other boards do and what CSBA recommends, and there's more context than we're able to sort of get into right now. I'm fine with this being first reading, but my suggestion would be overall that the next reading be in that sort of setting.
So can you expand a little bit more about what you mean, the second setting?
Oh, a retreat setting that's facilitated
Okay.
with somebody who has seen how boards do it all across the state. And we've had such success with the facilitator thus far. So unless there was some impetus to this or timing or something like that, but it seems as though.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one thing that is in it, but we've just found ourselves in new territory as a board of processes that not been in place, and we've just got to be on the fly and do the best that we can. So I think this is a great opportunity to kind of get that in there. I think you can, Mr. Matsuoka, you could look at other boards and see what they do in terms of that, or, wait suggested to a retreat, but we normally don't have those for a while back. But it seems like it's important enough to know that, as a board, you can call a special meeting, particularly this particular issue, then we can put that language in there, but maybe further clarified it. So I don't have a problem with
Again,
that.
I'm fine with that suggestion. I was sort of allowing taking advantage of the conversation as we kind of were hashing this out,
Right.
that maybe that hashing out is better in a facilitated discussion.
Yep.
But don't mean to slow it down. If you want to move forward with that, adding that change, I'm perfectly happy with that change.
Okay, great.
So I've heard various suggestions. So it feels like there's an additional clause to number 1, comma, taking into account input from board members
A request from board
or
members.
requests from board members, taking into account requests from board members.
Yep.
Would there be, I'm just raising this as a question, so would this be in a timely manner? Because it depends on the situation in hand. Is it something that a board member might request a meeting, but it's going to be based on an issue that has come up, so to get a response in a timely manner, or a potential board meeting to discuss a particular issue? I feel like this is important to bring up, and I really think it's a good discussion to have right now, but I want to have a little more understanding of how we would lay out the process. So maybe I'm just calling to, and maybe that would be something that you could research how other boards
the
call
process
these
of it.
meetings forward. Just how is that, what is that process? Is there like, you know, we get our documents on Friday, and then we're, you know what I mean? Like, we have a process of how we review the materials for a board meeting. So what would be a process or a procedure that would be in place?
The issue that you're discussing is, you know, how do special board meetings get decided?
Right.
My experience, special board meetings have been rare in my career. In fact, I really can't think of any time where I've seen a special board meeting called. Where it does come up if there's an emergency around facilities sometimes, or you know, a sudden change in leadership. You know, the superintendent is ill, and you know, you have to make a quick decision. As far as, I mean, there's a clause in there as he or she may deem necessary. I know it's putting a lot of, like, I guess, power in the hands of the board or the president.
Ain't that much power.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a board. I mean, in terms of those pieces. So given the proper notice, given the issue, in terms of that. So it can certainly be, it's like, as required by law. So if, let's say something came up and we wanted to call it a special meeting, we'd have to figure out where we are in our schedule in terms of that. Do we have time to give proper notice so that the public knows that we're having that meeting? So I think that we have a process in place. We just need to add now, what I'm hearing is that we want to be able to also add that other members beside the president can request a special meeting.
Or if they request a special meeting, they meet with the president and confer with the president and superintendent. But ultimately, where does that decision lie? Who is so the president would then take that into consideration, but ultimately make that decision?
I don't know, we'd have to.
Between in terms of board or superintendent, the board president should have the final say about calling a meeting. It shouldn't be me. I report to you. Now, do I have opinions about special meetings? I will always have opinions. You know, the timing of it, the content, et cetera. But here's the thing, if the board decides they want a special meeting, then we should have it. What I don't want to have is an individual board member says, I want a special meeting, and that now triggers a special meeting, because otherwise we're going to have, it should be a board decision about calling a special meeting. Now, how do you do that when you're not together? You know, that comes down to a process, it comes down to communication. So it comes down to judgment calls sometimes.
Ms. Ford.
I do think there are two things we're talking about here. First of all, I would like to have that additional phrase added. But I don't think the phrase actually addresses all the questions that have come up to Ms. Capps and Dr. Reed's point. So I think that, you know, and I wrote it down when I was looking at these, that it's really, these are perfect subjects for a board retreat. So I think protocols and procedures should be established in a board retreat. I think it's advisable to add that one phrase and then be sure that we follow up with training.
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying. We want to add that, and then we'll talk it further out in a retreat when we get there next. So I think we hear you, and you've noted that we'll add that phrase with regards to also including requests from other board members besides the president.
Okay.
Who's ever in this seat. Just happens to be windy today. So.
All right, any other edits on board president sheet? Okay, Brian, just go straight to the last one. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Just an encouragement to participate in annual training opportunities whenever possible. The biggest one is the CSBA conference every December. The Susan Salcido has been successful in bringing the Masters in Governance series to Santa Barbara County. I know I had a schedule conflict with the first one. We should get reconnected with that schedule, and if you want to participate in that, let us know and we'll get you signed up. It's nice that they brought it local because driving to
Monterey,
or
Bakersfield.
wherever, LA or
Yeah.
Sacramento, it's pretty hard to get to from Santa Barbara. Okay.
Okay. Additional comments? So we're good on that report? Okay, I think we've come to the end of our report. So
All
do you have
right,
some final
so I will
comments?
take these, I'll capture suggestions, and then are you ready for me to bring these back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? It's ready.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing these forward, because I think
Yeah.
we should have these conversations, so thank you.
But to clarify, they'd be coming back in a retreat format, is that correct?
The ones that are like minor changes, but further discussion, like the one we just talked about, we want to make sure we follow up on that in a retreat topic.
Okay, so am I bringing all 6 of these back to a board meeting?
I would think so, in
Okay.
terms of that, unless someone else
All right.
has something different. And then again, with the note to follow up on it in a more elaborate, facilitated format.
Okay. All right. I'll bring these back next board meeting. If I get enough time to edit, I'll put them on consent, and if you have any of them that you want to pull for further review, we can do that.
Well, thank you. Okay, so there is no items that need to return from consent. Coming events? Does anybody have any coming events that's upcoming? Ms. Munoz?
Back to school nights are coming right up next week.
Yes, they are. And then future agenda items. Mr. Muff, can you talk about, we talked about how we could put a report together that you would be able to navigate throughout the meeting in terms of future agenda items. I know we talked about it briefly, but if you can put that up.
Watch.
Watch.
Oh, did you turn off the projector?
Oh.
Well, it's on my computer.
Oh, it's on, let's see.
All right, so in the weekly Friday letter, in the upper right-hand corner, there's the beginnings of, it's probably going to end up being a board dashboard. And so I've got the VIP calendar linked in there, I've got meetings with me linked in there, and now I've got this board agenda development calendar linked in. And so what we're doing is, and I literally updated it as we were listening tonight, so non-fraternization policy, which now has a new name, is I'm putting it under presented topics, meaning pretty much completed. You know, there's a little bit of cleanup that needs to come back. California Healthy Youth Act was presented tonight. What's coming is GATE. So I've asked Dr. Ramirez to pick a date when this board agenda topic's going to come to you. SPED, we've set for October 8th, and then CAFS test scores are coming to you the next board meeting. And so as you guys feed requests, it's going to be dropped in here so you can see it every Friday what the production timeline's going to be. And then as we complete them, I'm going to roll them towards the bottom. I think it'll be encouraging for us to see the list of what we complete. Okay? It's also, it's good visual feedback. We have to pace these out because your requests usually involve some research and writing.
Any comments or questions, suggestions? Dr. Reed?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so, it is 20 minutes, so are we going to be turning back to our closed session for a few minutes discussion? Okay, all right, so I'll just, our next meeting is September 10th, 2019, starting at 6:30, and we're going to adjourn back out into closed session. Thanks.